So welcome everybody to today's meeting, which is the meeting of the Transport and Connectivity Policy Committee. So if you're here for another meeting, you probably need to go and find a different room. I'd like to welcome members of the committee, officers, but particularly the members of the public who have come here today to participate in democracy. So thank you for coming, public. The emergency evacuation procedure is in the event of the alarm sounding, please leave the room calmly via the lobby area out of the main front door, turn right, walk down to the ramp towards the cathedral, and the assembly point is in front of the cathedral. So I'm going to ask members of the committee to introduce myself. My name is Ed Plowden, I chair this committee, and I'll let you organise yourselves as to what order you go in.
Councillor Emma Edwards, Councillor for Bishopston and Ashley Down Ward.
I'm Rob Breyer, Councillor for St George West Ward.
I'm David Wilcox, Councillor for Lockleys Ward.
Nicholas Coombs, Westbury Henleys.
Kaz South, Southmead.
Tim Rippington, Councillor for Brislington East.
Don Alexander, Avonmouth and Lawrence Weston.
Thank you. We've got apologies have been received from Councillor Morris, who's the Vice Chair. He called me this morning and said that he'd actually spent last night in hospital, and so he did agree that I should tell everyone that, and I wish him all the best for his recovery, and I'm sure you'll join me in wishing him well. Has anyone got any interest to declare in relation to items of business on the agenda? I'll take that as a no. Can I move the minutes of the previous meeting of the committee held on the 5th of December as a correct record? Would someone like to second that? David?
I second those minutes, Chair.
Are you happy that I sign the minutes as a correct record?
Would you like to do it afterwards?
Yes, I'll do that afterwards. So, next thing on the agenda item is Chair's announcements. One of the announcements I've got today is that we have a packed agenda, and so we have decided how much time we've allotted to each of the slots as a guideline, and I will be mentioning that to members of the committee on the basis that I would like to us to try and keep our comments as brief as possible, but obviously while still having a good democratic debate. As ever, officer decision notices that I've been countersigning will be published on the internet for anyone to see all those decisions that are taken that need to be logged. And I'm going to invite Tim, Councillor Rippington, to just say maybe a few words about the Task and Finish group on supported bus services. You will have seen over the last day or so we've announced the new routes, and that's been in the press and everywhere else. So, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, hopefully by now everyone has seen the Council's press release announcing that we've secured 3 new bus routes using the CAS funding set aside for supported bus services. Task and Finish Group took a lot of factors into account in determining which routes ultimately to support, and I'd like to thank everybody involved for the hard work they put in to do that. I think it is vital that we work as hard as possible to improve our public transport in the city. We all know the limitations set by private ownership of the bus companies, but I'd like to thank them too on this occasion for engaging collaboratively in this endeavour, and I hope this will continue going forward, although as a Labour member I'm looking forward to exploring other models of ownership and control of the bus network in the years to come. There's a small but significant amount of money left in the budget at the present time, which we obviously didn't know would be the case until the result of all the tenders came in. So the Task and Finish group has agreed to continue until we can allocate that money as well, in time for the September timetable changes. We've also discussed the monitoring of these services going forward to ensure we get best value for money, and if necessary can make minor adjustments that might be required. And we're also keen to maintain a good ongoing relationship with both the Mayoral Combined Authority and the bus service providers, and I believe the Chair will be bringing proposals to a future meeting on how we might do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I'm really glad that you were able to steer a cross-party consensus, whatever the Labour Party's slightly disingenuous social media might be claiming. And I certainly agree that we need to work with WECA to make sure that we're monitoring this and how well they do. And in fact, have been trying to get better, more transparent monitoring across all of the supported bus services and the BSIP grant. And certainly, I will be looking to make sure that these are made more successful wherever possible, our bus routes, on the basis that we should have some revenue budget from the new bus grant to do promotions, and I'd like to see some specific promotions around these bus services. Can I just ask, so next we're moving to the public forum. We've got up to 30 minutes for the public forum. We will take public forum statements first so that we can best use the remaining time for questions. Could I just have a show of hands of how many people are here to make a statement? So that's 1, 2, 3. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take, for accessibility reasons, I've agreed to take these in reverse order, the statements. So I hope that's okay with everyone. So first up is Caroline Dunn. Caroline, I hope you know that ideally we're trying to, you've made a very full statement, and hopefully you're able to summarise it in roughly a minute or so.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm not very good today. I'm rather breathless, Chair Plaid, and I hope you will appreciate I can't be as fast as I would wish to be, but to start. This is an enhancement, not a repetition of my statement to full council. There needs to be a change in perspective and then actions. Let me enthuse you with the aspiration to make BCC a new collaborative council that goes beyond PCED, public sector equality duty, to make Bristol a national model of excellence in the way it treats disabled people and pulls outdated attitudes down. Cooperative working yields new possibilities despite serious budget problems. Spend differently, not necessarily more. Failing PCED could prove very expensive, as will ad hoc afterthoughts needed to finally comply. For some years I have felt discriminated against by the old juggernaut's car and therefore blue badge antagonistic policies. I realise BCC lawyers can often probably weasel their way around PSED failings, but really, do we want to aim for that? I implore you to do better at planning and plan us in. I applaud Councillor Dyer's remarks recharging for bays. He is quite right. It would increase our imprisonment and not your receipts. Why am I directing this primarily at transport? Because access to events, shops, meetings is essential. Without free and easy access, we are discriminated against, excluded out, and you all fail in your public sector equality duty. Now, 4 out of 5 disabilities and health conditions are acquired, and you may get a blue badge, or even worse, a Zimmer frame. Please do not put us behind a paywall to visit the Downs or our health centres. I can spend up to 2 hours at my own health centre, and I really feel you need to demand proper information from the executive and revisit the Westbury-on-Trim public car parking charges. How many people will want to visit the new Broadmead? It seems only 20 bays are provided. But what about how many disabled people will live there? The whole thing is ridiculous. And the Silver Motion today and Charlton Road proposal do not mention us. And cycleways are used primarily by men. Radio 4's Women's Hour said that over 70% of women do bicycle, but they bicycle at home on stationary things. Not proper bicycling outside, like I used to when I was able to, and cycle to work when I could in my 20s and 30s. Let me inspire you to start thinking things through properly and stop this discrimination. Plan us in, plan with us. We have got to change the future. We've got to change the future now. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you for coming in today. I'm doing this in reverse order, so next up is David Redgewell.
The Portway scheme that's on your agenda tonight, which I was involved with Councillor Alexander, still prevents me from crossing the road to get to Charlton railway station. I use that train station quite regularly. I've got friends in Charlton. We raised this at consultation, raised the issue of access to Seamill Station. We have a government policy on the 20th of February, Sovereign Rail Transport Policy, white paper. I do not understand. I can't fly over that bridge. I can't take myself through that traffic in my wheelchair. Somebody tries to push me across the road. I could go and do one of those juggernauts that are going down to the port or into the motorway. But again, we've been planned out. We sat for hours. I'm a member, as you know, I'm the passenger rep and equalities rep on the West of England Combined Authority panel with North Somerset, which is a DFT's report back. And it's still not been planned into this city regional transport. Ed, can you please relook at this with Don? Don's a local member, and see what can be done for disabled people to get into the railway station that we spend £35 million a year providing train services on as part of the West of England Combined Authority subsidised services. We had this at excuse me, my voice is good. Ashley Down, and Councillor Edwards tried to help us there. You know, and we've still not got that interchange there. And now we're doing it again. And yet interchange is part of the criteria for the West of England and Bristol City Council. So I'm asking you just to have a look at that. And can I please ask you to look at the publicity? You're on the board with me on Monday. Yeah, we've got a board with Monday. Please can we look at the publicity? I'm in support of principle. We are of your Portway scheme. We just want to make sure that the scheme is right and we have all the bus routes, the wheelchair accessible stuff for National Express.
Thank you, David.
We capture it all. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, David. Noted. Next up is Matt Sanders. Not here? No. Gosh. And finally, Nick Davis. Is that... yes, Nick Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'd just like to support what Dave Redgewell, slightly off topic, said. Certainly the inadequacy of the proposals for new crossings across the Portway, particularly in Shirehampton, which is a place where people live. It should not be treated as an urban motorway. And that's the problem with this whole design, which is treating the whole of the Portway simply as an urban motorway to get people in and out of Bristol, and not as a place where people live and spend time and sort of recreation and all the other uses. Which it's actually a beautiful place, as you would have seen if you'd been there at the weekend when the motorway was closed, or the dual carriageway was closed for tree felling, and it really was lovely. Peaceful Portway was a success a while ago. This doesn't even look like a bus scheme, in fact. It looks like a status quo carriageway restoration, resurfacing, and very expensive. I think now you're proposing to really just a very expensive road maintenance scheme from supposedly from a sustainable transport project. One fears it may be many years before the bus lanes even become operational. I think of the Bristol Link, that's 7 years and counting. I think the same with the A4018 Passage and Falkendale Road, bus lanes which will not be used for a very long time. For the point of view of cycling and walking, there's a substandard cycling and walking pavement there at the moment, and the proposal is simply to widen that very slightly in a number of places, but still something like 25% remains below the 3 metre recommended
Nick,
minimum.
could you start wrapping up, please?
Certainly. Active Travel England assess the improvement for cycling at 4%, which is trivial, and you're using all sorts of bizarre modelling figures which appear to be made up. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Is there anyone else here who wanted to make a statement? No, we're moving on to questions then. So first, I'm assuming Harvey and Simon aren't here. So the next question is from Suzanne.
Great, thank you. So my first question I noticed that YTL have announced they're expanding the arena capacity to 19,500 people. The papers that I've seen are still using 17,000 at the capacity, and saying that's still a major concern for transport. So I just wondered, is a new transport plan needed for a 19,500 capacity arena complex?
So officers to respond.
Yeah, so the the planning approval that was granted was for a 17,000 capacity venue. So they are limited to currently to operating events 17,000. If they wish to expand that to 19,500, they will also have to have discussions with us and submit alterations to that. What we require of that when that request comes in will be decided by the planning service at the time.
Thank you. Shall I go on to my second one, which I think probably then has been answered, because I just wondered whether any modelling has been done, but presumably you won't be doing any modelling until it's actually needed to be done.
And yeah, it would be their responsibility to do the modelling. As I say, the planning team will set out what their requirements would be for the submission.
And then it was sort of finally, I know that having an out-of-town arena was really the previous mayor's baby, and it looks like he's kind of in touch still with YTL. But it would seem really that the current administration should also be communicating with YTL. So I just wondered, before they make these announcements about expanding the arena, press releases and things, have they been in contact with the current administration about that?
So I haven't met or spoken with YTL. The leader of the council met YTL on site at the Brabazon on the 31st of July 2024. That's all the information I have to answer that question. I'm sure, Suzanne, you're very well versed. If you needed more information about that, then I'm sure you're very well versed in being able to source that information.
I think that might be difficult, but thank you.
You didn't have any follow-up or supplementary questions, Suzanne? You are entitled to them. Okay. So next we have David Redgewell. You've asked 3 questions, so you can have 3 questions and supplementaries if you wish. Can we make sure, Dave, that there are questions rather than statements? We've got a copy on paper, if that helps.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I suppose my supplementary one on the Portway, which is the one that's on there tonight, is...
Dave, yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My supplementary is why did they look at Hun Road and not actually look at the interchange with the railway station and the bus stops? Because that is where the interchange is. That's where the... So why did we not do an interchange audit? We've had this with Ashley Down, so why did we not do a proper interchange audit? Because I can't fly over the footbridge. It's just ridiculous. And as colleagues said behind. So can we understand this? There's an environmental impact assessment that could be published and given to us to understand why there wasn't an audit of interchange between Metro West Rail, Park and Ride bus, 41 bus, or if there's Park and Ride bus at that point, and the station, which is obviously a requirement of the new Labour government in London.
Thanks. Do you want to respond, officer response?
I don't know the details of whether that was looked at in detail. I guess we would assess the numbers of people using it. Obviously, we have some degree of interchange at the Park and Ride site with the railway at that location. I can certainly take that away and ask the team the question.
Thank you. I look forward to a copy of the Equality Impact Assessment as well, please, and DIA, which is a rail requirement. Yeah, I mean, I'm a great supporter of Park Street in principle, but I just don't understand how we've ended up with a leaflet that fails to mention all the bus services on it, fails to mention the coach service stop. And really, when I'm out with the travelling public, and that's what I do for WECA as a public rep, passenger rep and equalities rep, most people say the leaflet's useless. They don't even know it includes most of network ed going through there. So what can be done to actually improve that leaflet and the marketing over the next few weeks? And the really issue is, I use the hospitals in Bristol for my health condition. We've got poor air quality outside the BRI. We must make sure these regional hospitals don't have any more traffic past them. So how can we improve this working with WECA and those leaflets which are dire to make sure that we actually capture the scheme and we actually consult with all the bus passengers, coach passengers. It's 11 services, 3 coach services that all go through that scheme. So that's what I'm asking is, can we improve that? And is there going to be a look at these publicity by John and directors at WECA to make sure it's sort of compliant between the two organisations?
I think there's a lot of questions in there. Do you want to have a go, Adam?
As a supporter, I say.
Yeah. I mean, on the air quality point, the air quality past hospital is significantly improved since Clean Air Zone has gone in. It is now well below the compliant level. The modelling that we're starting to see from the scheme does not show significant additional traffic through there because it is largely at capacity during the peaks. I can certainly ask a question to the team about incorporating wider bus movements into the consultation documents and the engagement documents. The focus of that whole corridor has been on the 2 route as a scheme. Obviously, there are other benefits for other buses in the area, so yes, we can certainly look at capturing that in future.
I put back National Express. I spent a lot of time with Don out there measuring up the National Express stop at Queen's Road for the university. Can that be, please, even if you do it yourself, Ed, be followed up and make sure we got a proper national, because my wheelchair doesn't go up and down on a normal pavement. It has to have a properly built National Express stop, and this needs and Flixbus needs some discussions. That's all I'm asking. Thank you.
I think the best take away that as an action and have a look at it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So lastly, Nick Davis. You've got 3 questions and possibly 2 supplementaries. I don't know if you've seen the published answers or if you'd like to go through them.
Yes, I have seen the answers very briefly. My concern is that this scheme, which is supposedly a sustainable transport scheme, seems very rapidly to not being a sustainable transport scheme. It seems rather odd that £8 million of money for sustainable transport should be used to resurface a dual carriageway. And I would hope that the council would not simply say, well, this may not happen. We're only approaching WECA, but would say, well, actually, we don't want to do this. If there is 8 million spare, we will apply it to cycling and walking in some other part of the city, or even to improving the rather substandard cycle route.
That was sort of question, I guess. I don't know if you want to respond to that, Adam.
So the scheme, as detailed, is a sustainable transport project. It's about providing bus lanes, which you have commented on extensively. It also provides a widened cycle path. There is an option to resurface. Some of the works will put some damage on the surface through doing relining, etc. So it's beneficial to repair that. Resurfacing does provide some sustainable transport benefits in terms of ride quality for bus users in particular. The whole CRSTS package is for maintenance as well as sustainable transport, so maintenance funding is included within CRSTS. It's a valid use of the funding. We can't take a scheme from nothing to completion in 2 years' time, so spending it on other things is not an option. It's been put forward as an option for funding as part of a wider review of CRSTS and what the options are for ensuring that all the funding gets spent by the deadline A decision hasn't been made on whether that funding will be allocated at this point in time.
And can I just add to that I think if you're going to do extensive works on a road, then actually coordinating it so you don't end up closing it again a few years later is probably quite a good way of going about it. Did you want any other supplement? Last chance, Nick?
Yes. I've been very concerned by some of the cycling designs which involve having to dismount in order to pass from roads on what you might call the suburban or city side, non-river side of the Portway, in order to get to the Portway shared use pavement. It seems to be predicated. Nothing has been designed in the designs we've seen. It seems to be predicated. If people obey the law, they will dismount from their bicycles and push them only a few yards to crossings. In some cases, pedestrian crossings, which they will have to walk across. In other cases, they're toucans, so they'll be able to remount and cycle across. But normally in such kind of shared use schemes, there is some shared use and drop curbs on the other side in order to enable people to cycle to and from the scheme. You almost might get the impression that somebody doesn't really want anyone cycling and using this shared use pavement.
I don't think there was a question there.
I'm not sure what the question was, but I
Is
think
it the case that you have to dismount from your bicycle in order to access the Portway at several junctions?
So we'll look at those particular locations that you've raised. If we need to put in some extra drop curbs, we can do that at little cost. Yeah, we'll look at it.
So you said, Nick, I haven't had a chance. You sent me an email this afternoon. I've obviously been preparing for this committee, and so I haven't had a chance to go through it all, but I have already forwarded it to Adam and the project manager. So I will, and I think we'll have a look at some of those detailed suggestions as where we can make improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you for engaging with the public forum. We now move on to agenda item 7, which is a safe travel home for nighttime economy workers. And we've allowed 15 minutes for this. Again, it's a guide and we're slightly ahead of time at the moment. So the purpose of this report is to respond in full to the Silver Motion approved at full council on the 12th of November 2024, which covers both public transport and mobility issues, as well as taxi licensing, premises licensing and operational issues. The public transport and mobility issues are addressed in full in this report. The taxi licensing and premises licensing matters are covered elsewhere and will be addressed through the appropriate regulatory committees, but they have been referred to here for completeness. This is a non-key decision update report, so I'm going to invite Adam to introduce and outline the report back.
Yeah, thanks. So this is a report about the Silver Motion and what the recommendations are. So in short, the background is about the campaign to get people home safely, improving nighttime bus travel and also access to other modes late at night. Much of that sits outside of the council's direct control, so it will sit with the combined authority, local bus services, the integrated mobility service as well. So the key proposal in essence is to write a letter to the Mayor of the Combined Authority to set out our support for the campaign. So within that we will seek that there are no proposed cuts to supported bus services, to review existing bus services and look at how those nighttime services can be better provided, and also what can be done around IMS, e-bikes, e-scooters and taxis and such like. It is probably worth highlighting there was some consideration of funding additional nighttime services as part of the Task and Finish group, but other services were felt to be a priority, but it is something that was within that priority list to consider. There's some notes in there about the licensing and taxi licensing, which will go to the licensing committees, just highlighting that it's not legally possible to add standard conditions to the licence. We were one of the first authorities to implement the recommendations from the DFT about taxi and private hire, but also cross-border hiring is an issue for us. So quite a lot of taxis are registered in different authorities like South Gloucestershire, so there is a limit to what we as one authority can do, but there may be some options for how that could work on a regional basis with the combined authority. So to get to recommendations, essentially it's noting the comments provided, supporting the further work that will be associated with those comments. Obviously, we will continue to work with the combined authority, and approving the chair of the committee to write to combined authority mayor along the lines of the points made in the paper.
I'd like to invite Kaz, who led this motion, and I think it was passed unanimously, wasn't it, at the time? So I think I'd like to hear your take on the response we've got.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Adam, for the response. I really do appreciate what you put down on paper here, and the short period of time that you've come back from the time the motion was actually passed. So much appreciated. Just a few small points I want to raise. On the specific measures in the proposed letter to the combined authority, on the last bullet point, there seems to be no mention of private vehicles in that point. Many workers in the nighttime economy rely on this as a form of transport, and many of these people come from some of the poorest wards in the city. So we need to recognise that and not price people out of work by high overnight parking, and the other thing is to having to pay the clean air zone twice. And on that last point, a recent nighttime economy summit, not the one that Ed and Tim went to, but one a couple of months ago, I heard from an esteemed panellist that a midnight changeover for the CAS was a real issue, because it's not just related to this particular point, but for the nighttime economy in general. So I'm kind of looking for a detailed reason as to why this can't be changed. And I just wonder if somebody could actually give me that at some point, just so I know what the difficulty is and why we can't do it. And a couple of other points. I'm very much in support of seeing measures delivered that will enhance public transport network, so nighttime buses, and there may be some other ideas we can think of going forward, but hopefully in the task and finish group we can identify some opportunities. I welcome the comments on cross-border hiring. As somebody on the Public Safety and Protection Committee, like other people on this side of on the committee here today, that's a real concern to me. And there doesn't seem to be any action on the point. The motion calls upon the Council to make representation to government and other appropriate authorities to bring forward national minimum standards. So I just wonder if maybe we ought to be not just writing to WECA, but maybe the government as well. Certainly lots of other motions have come forward asking us to write to government, so why not this one? But thank you.
Thanks, Kaz. That's an interesting thought about the national minimum standards, and it may be something that we want to discuss now as a group. Certainly in terms of the letter, I'm really happy if anyone wants to take it as an electronic copy, track changes on it, then I'm really happy to consider all of those. So it's a bit of a joint effort, and I'm genuinely sending it on behalf of the committee. So if you'd like to get in there and track some changes, then we'll definitely consider them, because I think it can only make it stronger. Emma.
Thank you. Yeah, I would be really happy to help with that as well. Kaz, I'm really pleased that you brought this motion, because it's something that we really do need to consider, because it is an equalities issue. And, you know, I'm very aware that one of the things that we talk about a lot, especially as Greens, is, you know, is this modal shift, and everyone needs to get on their bikes and everyone needs to use public transport. That is not easy in the nighttime economy. We're not there yet. I don't know if it was the same summit, but some colleagues were at a nighttime economy summit in the last week, where they did look at night buses and how that is really key to to work in the nighttime economy, making the nighttime economy work. However, reading the papers, actually looking at an appendix from one of the other items from this evening, from Appendix B, where it says 45% of women feel unsafe using public transport at night. 38% of women feel unsafe in a taxi alone. And 32% of women experience harassment on public transport. So night buses are not a panacea, they are a part of it. They're not a silver bullet. Some people aren't ever going to feel safe using a bus at night. And also, when you get to the other end, you might not live right near a bus stop. You might have a 10-minute walk in the dark home. So I think we do need to think about the private vehicle. But also, I think part of that, I think we had a meeting earlier this year with the Bristol Business Improvement District, the BID, and they were discussing maybe working with local businesses within the nighttime economy at things like shared cars, shared lifts, minibuses, shuttle buses, car sharing, sharing taxis. So I think there are lots of different steps that we can do to appreciate that some people will only feel safe, or it might be an accessibility issue that they need to go door to door. But within that, there might be also other solutions. So shared lift, minibuses, for example. So I'd be really interested to maybe work on that with Councillor Self. And yeah, happy to sign anything going towards to the government about this.
Maybe we could think about putting something to do with Westlink. I know it doesn't operate after 7, but maybe using that functionality in all those vehicles would be something that could be quite useful.
Chair, if I could just quickly say, I actually had that on my notes and I was tempted to mention it, but I appreciate all the things that Councillor Edwards has just said and totally agree with what she's proposed there.
In which case, let's get something about Westlink in there. Tim and then Rob.
Yeah, thanks. Just wondering whether we could get an answer in this forum, even if it's just a brief answer to Cass's question about whether the sort of midnight crossover for CAS, whether that is something that is set in stone by a rule book or whether it's something that has or could be looked at.
Yeah, I think I'd want to take it away and get the kind of detailed legal response as to the reasoning for it. And obviously there has to be a cut-off point at some point. So if you do it at 3 a.m, someone that works in that period will have the same issue. I'll need to take it away and find out why exactly 12 was chosen and why there isn't a way of mitigating that issue. But I'm sure we'll take the action down and we'll get a response provided.
And presumably it's a very difficult thing to actually check. I mean, so there's two bits of this. Why is it there in the first place? And then the second is there any chance of doing something about it, which I'm guessing is maybe tricky.
I'd assume it will be part of the order, which would then require consultation and such like to change.
At the moment, we're doing some modelling through a company. We're making a number of suggestions to the DFT of how we might change the grant. Still unspent grant for helping people adapt to the CAS. Is this something that we could possibly put into the modelling, or is that too late?
I don't think it'd be a modelling issue. I don't think it would have a significant impact on the total journey numbers in terms of creating pollution. I guess it's more of a technical issue as to why it was that point in time and whether that could be changed or not.
And the capacity to actually do a TRO or whatever order it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Chair, just to say, I think it's something that we get asked about quite a lot, so it would be useful to have a definitive answer on, whether it's something that might be possible or not. That would be great. I was also going to come back and say, obviously welcome the idea that we write to the Combined Authority, but I think we have learnt from recent actions that we've taken that proactivity on our part can also help the Combined Authority move in directions we want it to go in. So very keen that we follow up on this kind of on the proposals here by actually pushing them when we're in meetings with them to follow up on what we've asked them if they'd be willing to do. Just to say, yes, we looked at nighttime issues in task and finish group, and we will revisit that as part of our ongoing discussions about how to spend the rest of the money. It would be good in future. Appreciate our budget this year is very tight, but I think we should bear it in mind in looking at future budgets about putting money into this area, because it's not a commercial area that will ever pay its own way, but it's certainly something that as a city, if we want to improve, we should look at doing. And finally, yes, just it is a bit disappointing on the nighttime economy to see in the budget that we've still got a figure for savings by moving to a linear parking model, something we discussed last week with people. I do think that is probably something that, as it's still in the task and finish group, I don't think a decision's been made there, so I hope we might find a way to not have to bring that in the way it's modelled at the moment, which would mean doubling of charges for people who park from 6 o'clock onwards.
So as you know, Tim, we've listened very carefully to the people who operate in the nighttime economy, and we're trying to sort of mitigate the effect of that on people who be very badly, that doubling or more even. We need to do something about it, and we're thinking about that. Let's just remind ourselves that by introducing linear parking, it's not a sort of fixed thing just in the evening. It will affect actually a wider time of the day. So came away from that meeting wanting that to be modelled so we can bring new, updated and improved proposals, hopefully to the next meeting, which reflect the conversation we've had in the chamber and the conversations we've had since that time. One of the things I'm really anxious about is that, without getting all technical about it, we'd kind of reached our de minimis limit to commission anything else from First Bus. So it's very difficult to actually be able to extend the contracts into the night time with the dominant provider, because we're already at our limit. So that was one of the reasons why it was more difficult to do that. I sort of really hope for a return to the days in 2019, 2020 when First Bus were running night buses all the way through the night because they had nowhere to park their buses and they'd run out of depot space, and it was actually the best and most economic option for them to be running buses through the night instead and getting some revenue from them. So it'd be great if that happened again, but that's maybe not something in our gift. Going to move on to Rob.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to... I've just completely closed the window that I was looking at. Is anyone else speaking? I had a load of notes written here. Hold on. Bear with me 1 second. How have I managed to do that? Okay. I'm raising the issue of... I think the proposed letter is good. I think the problem we've got is one of our partners. Buses don't go everywhere. They can't, but scooters go to a lot more places and there are a lot more parking spots. For my money, they're public transport in equally the same way that buses are now. I think we need to consider them really carefully in these discussions because, what we've learned, in the last week or so that DOT have had their contract renewed, which made me quite angry, to be honest, because I don't think they're offering a very good service. At the same time, I want to know what we're actually practically going to do around how they are held to account for some of the stuff that I don't think they're doing at the moment. And I think, one of the factors in this for the nighttime economy is that their scooters stop at 12 a.m., at midnight, and they don't start again until 6 a.m. So I think that is an issue. I'd like to learn why it is that is the case. I think that has been said at some point, but I can't remember the answer. The other thing I have down here is previously you had a test after a certain hour of the evening. I think at the moment, as I understand it, all it asks you, to test whether you're drunk, basically, to test whether you're able to ride the scooters. At the moment, I understand, it just says, are you sober? It just asks that question and you just hit yes or no. I haven't used them in the evening recently, but, that's pretty ridiculous. Who's going to say, you know what, I am going to stop just because you put this question in front of me? So I think, unfortunately, they are sort of failing in their duty of care to both people enjoying the nighttime economy, I would argue, and the people who provide it, who could easily access those scooters if they were available into the night, because obviously they won't have been drinking, they will have been working. So I think there's a lot of questions to ask of this service. There's a lot more we could get out of it, a lot more value for money we could get out of it, and I would like to, if not include it in the letter, at least make that point in some forum.
I think we can make the point that we'd like to a proper investigation of whether or not we can open it up overnight. I think we might want to also look, bearing in mind what Emma said, that it still may be a bit of a walk in the dark for some people from the scooter park, that we might also want, and I'm sure Don would be pleased with this, to be restarting the sort of long-term loans where you can actually park it in your own home. So those are two things that I think we might well include in the letter, if that's... we'll take that offline. We'll do that by consensus using track changes and hopefully get to a final version. I'm wondering if we need... hearing that we'd also like to write to national government as well as WECA about a couple of the issues there. Is that something that we can all agree here? That so I'm going to propose an amendment that we say approves the action for the chair of the committee to write to the combined authority mayor and the national government on the issues which are more pertinent nationally, which might include whether or not you can run scooters overnight because it's part of a national trial. Is that, would anyone like to second that? Okay, should we just, this is mainly for noting, but as we've just changed the recommendation, should we have a quick vote saying whether or not we're going to vote to the right to the national government as appropriate as well? So, yes? About what Kaz was talking about, particularly in terms of the cross-border hiring issues. Cross-border hiring issues, I think, and mainly the sort of licensing regime. Again, my pledge is that we'll make sure that everyone's broadly in line with anything we write. Okay, so I think we just add, approves the action for the chair of the committee to write to the combined authority mayor and national government as raising issues as appropriate. Are we happy to move on, committee? Thank you. Okay, next up is agenda item 8. This is the Arena Transport Plan Infrastructure Charlton Road walking and cycling improvement. We've allowed a very short amount of time, just 5 minutes or so for this item, because, and I'd like to just draw your attention that this is a non-key decision update report. We've brought it not because we have to, but particularly because Councillor Ruston has repeatedly expressed concerns. I'd like to mention that I've actually, he's made a statement, I'm sure you've all read it, about this. I've gone on site and I've also spent some time with him on Street View with officers as well. And I think I've been convinced that this is an adequate scheme as things stand. Don, do you want to?
Yeah, I say
you started
during my tenure, we did accommodate some local views along there while up there myself. So I think we have heard both sides.
And I think we've
have regular concerns about anything to do with cycling.
And I think we've understood that there's some constraints, particularly around allotments, where you get into a whole world of permissions and difficulties if you try and eat away at allotments. Tim, you'd like to say something?
Yeah, I don't have a strong view either way on this in particular, but I was interested to read Councillor Weston's comments. They're always, worth paying attention to, and I just wanted to get a bit of a sense of particularly what he was saying about cyclists and pedestrians sharing space in a busy area with lots of elderly people, and can't the cyclists be moved onto the road at that point? I'm just wondering what the answer to that would be in terms of the scheme, and as you said, you've had a look at it. And the other one about the safety of pedestrians crossing the cycle lane to get to the bus stops. And again, I can see potential conflict there, so I'm wondering what the mitigations or the dangers are with that.
I think the simple answer to that is it's as in line as possible with national standards in terms of crossing to the bus stop.
Yeah, shared spaces are permitted under LTN 120 in some circumstances. They're perfectly adequate where pedestrian numbers are relatively low. The scheme has been designed to fit into the space. Obviously, we have designed ways for people to access the bus stops. We have actually been doing a fair bit of work with disability groups in the city around access to bus stops, because we're doing more and more cycle schemes that have bus stops with the cycle bypass behind them. And we met on site with visually impaired pedestrians to understand the challenges that they face as an example. So we are doing a lot more work on that. I do appreciate the concerns being raised by people. There is often that concern when you're mixed in with cycling and pedestrians. We will take those comments away as part of the design process. I still think that, there is value in having that provision segregated from all the buses that will be using Charlton Road. Obviously, it's not a traffic through route, but it will be a kind of key bus route. So having that provision, I do think, is useful and beneficial.
I would suggest as well. From what I understand, there's likely to be a little peak in the morning and the afternoon because it may be attractive from people working at Airbus, I think it is. So we may see little peaks. I suspect that confident cyclists will probably use the carriageway, and this is definitely something that would be better for sort of children and less confident cyclists. So I think I'm reasonably content that it's not quite as drastic as Councillor Weston might worry. And then very occasionally, when the arena gets built, I suspect there's going to be a very large number of people coming out at once, and everyone's going to inevitably have to look out for each other. Kaz.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to speak on this one for two reasons. One, because I'm a committee member who represents a ward in close proximity to this road, and I welcome plans to improve cycling and walking infrastructure. But I've also been invited on a coffee date with Councillor Mark Weston, so I'm trying to avoid going on that date if I can, so if I can maybe speak about it here. And I welcome what's been said about the consultation. I think it's really important to listen to people and to take on board their comments. The zebra crossing seems to be very popular, so other bits maybe not so popular, so if maybe you can just keep the conversation going with what I would say and just see if there are any small tweaks that can be made or based on things that have been said. For example, the bus stop, if we can maybe make sure there are measures to control the speed of cyclists, because we've got potential conflict there, so good signage, maybe asking a cyclist just to slow down or some kind of whatever mini chicane, I'm not too sure. I'm a bit concerned about the allotment parking. Not too sure what you can do about that, but maybe you can just have a good think about that one. And I think that's all I want to say, and hopefully I'll avoid that coffee with Mark.
Any other comments? I've actually I've had 3 meetings this week with Alan Davis, who's chair of the Bristol Disability Equality Forum. I'm taking disability, I hope, Caroline. I'm trying to improve what we're doing on disability, and I'm listening very, very carefully. We're making sure that we've got very clear terms of reference, both for a strategic advisory group and a case-by-case advisory group. Alan, quite rightly, has held our feet to the fire and asked us to do better. And I know he's particularly concerned about bus stop bypasses as a personal issue for him. And I would like to think that we're not only meeting national guidance, but if possible, pushing the boundaries and making it even better, where we have no other alternative but to use them.
Yeah, we have specifically met Alan on site on Prince Street with some of his colleagues as well to look at the different issues and what represents good design on bus stops and what doesn't from their perspective.
I had one more point actually, Chair, about the equalities impact assessment, which I think came out yesterday, quite late. And I was just a bit concerned. It seemed to be quite rushed, and it seemed to be almost all the points were sort of seemed to be supporting the proposal. And the thing that occurred to me was that, do our equality impact assessments consider the views of the local residents as much as they do perhaps the scheme in general and people that are using the scheme? I just wanted to make that as a general comment.
Yeah, I mean, an EQIA is not the same as a consultation. It is about assessing the impacts on different groups, and a consultation will not always get responses from all the different groups you requiring in kind of equal amounts. So I do appreciate it came out late and it was a bit rushed, and I apologise for that. It's not a key decision as such, so it doesn't have a specific decision attached to it. That will come forward when needed, and we'll review at that point. But we will have some reference to people's concerns, but it's not a consultation document in that sense.
Personally, I would like to see qualities impact assessments done at the beginning of every scheme and then continuously revisited, including making sure that we collect demographic detail from consultees and reflect some of their views in them, rather than something that's been done sort of at the end. I think it should be an iterative process throughout, which I imagine Adam's going to tell me it is.
That is the general approach that we attempt to take. We're not always successful. That is the approach we intend to take.
Kaz.
I just want to say, I'm very keen to see them as well. Don't get me wrong, but I just want to make sure that maybe they are filled in with due time and consideration. I do have protected characteristics. I looked at some of the bullet points that have been filled in, and I wasn't perhaps totally in agreement with one of them. So that's the only point I'm making.
Having written and signed off a lot of EQIAs in my time, they're a difficult thing to get the balance right. You do your best. It's easy when you read them in the cold light of day to pick holes in them. So I think I appreciate the work, and I'd like to thank officers for the work they put in. And I'm going to be quite rigorous in making sure that the EQIAs are there at the beginning and reiterated and improved as we go forward. So I'm going to suggest that we note the findings of the walking improvements public and stakeholder consultation, and and the subsequent progression to the next stage of design and development of the scheme, and the continual iteration of an EQIA as part of it. And note that officers will work with ward members to keep the scheme under review, coffee dates or not, and provide compromise where possible following the concerns raised from the consultation. Shall we move on to agenda item 9? So this is the Canons Road and College Green Signals Refurbishment Scheme. We've allowed 15 minutes for this. We're actually way ahead of time at the moment, so thank you, committee, for helping with that. The purpose of this report, I think we are anyway.
About 5 minutes behind, but
oh, okay. We're just behind time. Okay. Okay, let's keep the pace up. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to accept and invest a large amount of money of funding from the mayoral combined authority as part of the CRSTS, and to procure and award contracts. Because this is over 500,000, it's a key decision. So I'm going to invite Adam just to say a few words briefly on the assumption that people have read the report, just to sort of help us.
Yeah, so this is the junction at the bottom of Park Street where Anchor Road joins. The signals are life expired. We've been looking to upgrade them for some time and to find suitable funding. There is a scheme design within the Park Street Triangle scheme for this junction. We're not implementing all the features of it as part of this request because that needs to be signed off at FPC stage, and that report will come in due course. What we are looking to sign off is effectively building the junction so we can get started on it ahead of other things, move the scheme forward quickly, deal with the maintenance issues that there are at the junction at the moment, and then if and when the Triangle Park Street scheme is approved, some changes can be made in terms of bus gates, the left turn ban, etc., to implement the more detailed changes that help the junction to operate better. So this is about bringing forward the funding. By the time it's built, we will hopefully have brought the other paper through, and if that is approved, those changes can be implemented to the scheme whilst it's being built, in essence. So the amounts are in there, and the recommendations are to approve the report to invest just over £1 million into the junction refurbishment, and authorise the Exec Director of Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair to procure and award the contracts, and to authorise the Exec Director of Growth and Regeneration to make any subsequent extensions or variations within the contract up to the maximum budget envelope outlined in the report.
So just to be absolutely clear, we're building this, it's future-proofed for a TRO, but it's not predetermining any TRO. Yeah. So a TRO will follow as part of a much wider set of TROs.
Yeah, the junction can operate in either form. So the TRO would then enable you to put some paint on the ground to create a bus gate and ban a left turn if you wanted to.
So I've got Nick, then David.
Thank you, Chair. Generally, I'm in favour of rescuing our maintenance budget with an injection of cash from the region, so that's a good idea. If it saves us having to spend our own money on repairing traffic lights, then getting Wecker to pay for it, yep, that works. What we shouldn't do is try and prejudice any future decisions by installing something that means that we've got to go ahead with something else, as has just been discussed. And I did want to check some of the details on that. The other key starting point is that £1 million for replacing traffic lights in place is very expensive. And I say it's not just the traffic lights, there are some works to curbs. And while we're at it, there are other works that could be done in that area while we're spending also taxpayers' money, but someone else's taxpayers' money in the area. So looking at the scheme in detail, coming out of Canons Road, I noticed that the left turn filter has been removed. So it's still legally possible to turn left, but there is no longer a filter lane for it. So just checking that taking away that stretch of highway doesn't require a TRO. And I'm also interested in checking that an HGV can still work its way around that acute angle that has been carved in for it from the curbs. Looking at the other end of the scheme, I note that the pedestrian crossing across St Augustine's Parade is still in its existing place. Vegetation is being put into to the east of it, but that constricted crossing that conflicts with the fairly newish cycle path is still as is, which I think is a missed opportunity to actually fix some of the problems of the earlier scheme in that location. I mostly use this part during peak time, going backwards and forwards to the station, and there is a lot of conflict at that particular crossing. Lots of pedestrians, cycles get annoyed with them because they want to be moving quickly, but there are people trying to be on both sides of the cycle path and both sides of the road. And there are things that I think we could do by perhaps moving the westbound stop line back. If you took that back 10 metres, it wouldn't affect traffic flow, but it would give more room for that crossing so that more modes can happen at once. So to summarise, just checking, does the left turn work, and is there still an opportunity to use this very expensive scheme to fix some of the issues in the area?
Yeah, so the left turn is feasible to do. We don't need a TRO to remove a bit of road. The restrictions are essentially the same through there. In terms of fixing that area, it is very complicated, and we have looked at it again as part of this scheme. You've got kind of two desire lines with the cycle route coming through there in the middle of it, which is very difficult to manage as a whole. If you move stop lines back a long distance, you do increase the intergreen period, which is a safety period between different movements, and that does impact the capacity of junctions, but also it has a bit of a safety implication, like the closer vehicles are to conflict points and the signals, the better they are to interact with each other at the junctions. So I haven't been in all the design meetings on that specific point, but I know it has been looked at in detail, and we would have gone around lots of different options for how that could work to get to the concluded design that we're at. We could probably provide details of those discussions if needed, but it will have been assessed, and I don't think there is a perfect solution in that location due to the space available and all the movements that are happening through there.
Do you think it's maybe jumping forward, but we're going to be looking at possible use of surface colouring. This might be one of those areas where at least there's an attempt to sort of resolve some of those conflicts, Nick, by use of a bit more colour on the pavement. So that's a decision we haven't yet made, so we'll leave that for now, but that's something that we might want to bear in mind for this scheme as it moves to its full and final design.
I note that a decision has been made, because one of the arrows says install new red pavement on slip lane. on cycle lane rather. That's the second arrow from the left. But the introduction of the vegetation in that location to the east, I think, makes the conflict worse.
So you mean the vegetation just to the east of the uncontrolled crossing point? So I think that's being done to discourage people from crossing in advance of the stop line, of the traffic stop line. So we're trying to encourage, what we're asking people to do is to cross the cycle route and use the pedestrian crossing, but obviously a lot of people won't do that. They will probably cross across the advanced cycle stop line. That bulge, I think, is there to stop people crossing in front of the traffic stop line, which would put them into a more dangerous, hazardous position. Well, they are, but
different in the hierarchy.
There's a different level of hazard there.
David, and then Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Nick has stolen my questions about the left turn, which is perfectly good, but I do have some others. The yellow box junction there is probably one of the most abused yellow box junctions in the city. Do we have any plans to put a camera on there to ease traffic flow, please?
Not at this stage. I think enforcing yellow boxes is quite a challenging thing, because if you start enforcing one, the implication is you're enforcing lots. Some of the older yellow boxes may not be ideally designed. I think now we do try and make yellow boxes as kind of constrained as possible, because one of the issues you have with yellow boxes is people drive into them thinking there's a space to get out, and then there isn't, and you can kind of be caught unawares. So there's a risk if you start enforcing them without properly reassessing all the yellow boxes, that you can have negative impacts by people then going, well, I'm never going to go anywhere near a yellow box. And when you look at some of the yellow boxes on roundabouts, for example, it's quite difficult for a driver to know if there's going to be a gap at the end of the yellow box. So we would want to review that. We are getting more powers to do moving vehicle enforcement. Yellow boxes is not one at the moment that we're looking to take forward, but certainly could be considered down the line.
Thank you for that. And I'd really quite like to have a conversation about extending the moving traffic enforcement camera stuff, because I think we've got over 5 sites in the city at the moment, and finding out if we can actually get some additional sites, because I think every councillor has a list of places where they could do it in their wards, and I think that'd be a really good thing to do.
I think fair comment, but we do need that's preempting a conversation
yes.
we're going to have in the next few months.
My second point is that as a cyclist, I quite often cycle up towards Park Street, and at the moment I can dive off onto the separated lane that runs up Park Street from the bit. Yeah, the bit that's green now, there is a way to get up, and at the moment it looks, from these plans, it looks like there is a separated pedestrian crossing place to go across to Denmark Street, which might well cause conflict if I were to dive off that road to join the separated lane. What's the story there? Because there are drop curbs that people use there at the moment, and removing them I think would be a bad thing.
So you're on road coming from the north, in essence, is that what you mean? Yeah.
I'm going to suggest that we take this offline, David. I'm fully in favour of as many drop curbs as possible, because people don't always follow our paths exactly as we'd like them to, and we do need to give them ability to get on and off the cycle paths as many times as possible, because there's this kind of, we too often have a presumption that we're all starting at the beginning and going to the end, whereas actually quite often we need interim drop curbs. So if you want to maybe send some annotated notes And same actually for Nick. If you do want to do anything notes, then Adam and I will make sure they're passed on to the project manager for hopefully what tweaks. I think Tim was next, and then Rob.
Yeah, Chair, just very quick question about the obsolete equipment at the moment. It says it includes failed vehicle detection equipment and inability to coordinate with the city centre urban traffic control. When we replace that, will that of itself give some improvements to traffic movements around there just by having equipment that actually does link in?
Yeah, so I mean, as the controller of the traffic lights get older, it starts to not be supported by the manufacturer, so some of the elements of it stop working, and therefore you lose some of the detection, which is what helps the traffic signals to know what's going on and talk to other sets of lights. So when it's replaced, all that will be refurbished and all that detection will be replaced, and it will be much better keyed into the rest of the network around it.
Yeah, just 2 points really. I think it's pretty tremendous. I really like this. I particularly like the public realm that is small in the sense of how much space it takes up, but in terms of what it could bring to that area, I think that's a really positive development to have extra bench, bit of planting in that area as well as vegetation. Controversial as it might be in other ways, I think it's good to put that in there. Secondly, I just think that this is quite a good exemplar for like Vision Zero stuff. I think it actually, I don't know the actual accident incident report for that corner where people cross, but I know anecdotally and from experience that loads and loads of people cross on a red person crossing over the road. So if this does bring down any chance of injuries and worse, then I think it's a really positive thing. And I think you've got to do loads of these kind of things over an entire city in order to make things safer for people. We can only do what's in front of us, and this is a really good example of one, I think.
Thanks, Rob. Emma.
Thank you. Yeah, I think just to echo what Nick said at the beginning, I think the shock when people see the first thing, it's like £1 million for a new traffic light sounds a lot, but actually this is really comprehensive. This does a lot. I think you're absolutely right about safety as well. The yellow box junction I think is really interesting because I think that can often be linked to how faded the yellow box is. You know, if people see a new yellow, very yellow box, I think their brains work quicker than one that seems a bit faded, and then they, I think there's something psychological there. I have no proof, obviously, apart from, driving around the streets of Bristol, but I do think that, keeping markings fresh and well signposted is really, really important for road safety. I had one quick question about the traffic lights. So I'm understanding that the system is getting too old, so you can't make those adjustments. With the new system, I'm assuming there will be scope then to adjust things. So, looking at optimum times for pedestrians and cyclists to, prioritise them, but then also counteracting that with backing up traffic. So will they be variable in that way?
Yeah, I mean, they will go on to so this junction has always been on the Scoot system. I think now some of the detection has failed, so it's proving challenging to keep it properly linked in. With the new set, it will be on Scoot. Now, that makes it variable, but not massively variable, because the point of Scoot is to try and link different sets of lights together so you don't have gridlock in the city centre area. So we try and design junctions in those areas to give walk with traffic so that pedestrians are crossing at the same time as the traffic. So you've got lots of opportunity, whereas, where you have a standalone pedestrian crossing, you want to push the button, you want it to change. That's much more difficult to do in a Scoot environment. So it has some degree of flexibility, and outside peak times it can come off of Scoot and will have its own detection to operate independently, depending on traffic volumes and that sort of thing, but it will be fully controllable in that way.
Fantastic, because obviously there's other schemes happening around it, so those traffic volumes might change, so that's good to know. Thank you.
I really look forward to the time when Scoot measures cycling and walking as well, but maybe that's sometime in the future. Does anyone else have any comments or observations they'd like to make about this? Kaz?
Just briefly, I just want to say that the pedestrian area, like Rob, I think is very good. I've crossed there many times. I think this is a significant improvement. One thing did just occur to me as I was looking at the picture. We talked about disabled people and elderly people. In terms of the durability of the surface, the paved surface, do we expect it to stay level for quite a number of years? Or is it going to get a little bit uneven, in your opinion?
So as part of the scheme, we'll be redoing a lot of the paving through there and you know, it'll be done to the appropriate standard, and if it isn't, then you know, we'll be snagging on it to make sure it is all done to the correct standard, so it is nice and smooth. You know, I'd expect that to last a decent amount of time. It's a very busy, well-used pedestrian route. You know, a lot of the time it's utilities that cause the pavers to get unsettled and such like. But yeah, that whole area will be repaved to make it much smoother and better for pedestrians.
I'm going to move us. Sean.
Sorry, I just wanted to say the actual specification is the same specification which has been installed up through Park Street and across the city centre, which is actually a very high level. Hence, the cost is quite high in the area for just signals, because the specification for the paving is a high specification which attracts a high cost, but it does bring that durability and that solid pavement for what is in a high pedestrian area.
So, in fact, go right back to the first comment made by Nick. This is an upgrade, not just a maintenance scheme, and we're very pleased that therefore it can be capitalised. I'm going to move us to a vote. The recommendation of the report is that this committee approves the investment of £1,037,560 in this junction refurbishment as part of the CRSTS programme, and under our statutory duties to maintain this failing highway asset. And I'm not going to read out all the delegations, but fairly standard delegations to the director to procure and make changes. And I do hope that we may make some tweaks to this as a result of the comments made, particularly by very helpful comments made by Nick and David. So I move this report recommendations. Would anyone like to second it? Thank you, Dom seconds it. And can you clearly raise your hand to show if you're voting for this? So I'm not going to do a name vote because that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Right, let's move on. So the next one is also a key decision, which is CRSTS project delivery.
Can I just check when we're having some kind of comfort break or something like that? It doesn't have to be now, but I'm just wondering whether we are planning one in.
I was hoping that we'd get through this one and then do that, maybe, if that's okay. Cross your legs if you're desperate, I guess. We've allocated the party leads gender conference 20 minutes for this, so we're just a little bit behind time at the moment, but not seriously. So the purpose of this report is to update on delivery of CRSTS projects in Bristol and seek approval for two elements of programme acceleration. One is the commencement of procurement for project construction before business case approval, but obviously just to line it up, but not actually to sign any contracts until it has been approved, and the commencement of some specific early works to enable early benefits realisation and de-risk project overruns. This is a key decision update report, as it is a decision involving over 500,000 and impacts more than 2 wards. And I'm going to invite Adam to introduce and outline the report. And I'm assuming that these are going, should these go ahead, they will work as standalone, even if the main bigger schemes don't get approval.
Yeah, so this is about accelerating delivery of the CRSTS programme. So what we are seeking is approval to start the procurement process, not to award contracts, but to start the procurement process in advance of FBC, OBC sign-off of a scheme, so that when approval is given, we are in a position to then award the contract to a contractor, which will significantly shorten our delivery timescales. This doesn't apply to every programme, every project. We're asking for it for the whole programme in case we need to apply it to every project. There's a list of projects in the appendix which sets out the ones that we are focusing on where we would like to advance it in this way. And in addition to that, we have another acceleration proposal which is about doing some early works. So the early works are standalone pieces of infrastructure. So for the city centre project, there's some bus stops and a section of cycle lane. And then for South Bristol Livable Neighbourhood, there are a number of kind of low-level impact things like cycle hangers and that sort of thing that we could do across the area, spend some money to start seeing some of the benefits without actually committing to any road closures and any significant changes across the area. So these are all things that can stand alone. The other point I would make about the procurement point is not all of the projects on here necessarily need us to advance it in this way, but by doing that we are able then to accelerate those elements of the programme that then de-risk the wider programme, because obviously the more we can build sooner, the less impact there is on the network in terms of construction impacts, but also on contractors in terms of their availability. So we're doing everything we can in essence to accelerate all of these work programmes to try and deliver everything by the March 27 deadline, and to be frank, as quickly as possible, because the sooner we deliver schemes, the sooner we get the benefits of them. So just going back to the recommendations, so I just lost my point. So the recommendations then are to approve the commencement of procurement for the CRSTS programme of projects listed in Appendix A1 on the basis that a further report will be brought back to this committee to seek approval of business cases and authority to award those contracts. Approve the commencement of early works in advance of full business case approval and wider project construction tender as outlined in Appendix A2. And then authorising the Exec Director of Growth Regeneration in consultation with the Chair of the Committee to take all steps required to procure and award those contracts for construction of the early works as detailed in Appendix A2.
Tim. Nick.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, so it's a well-known factor that we have to spend this money by 2027. And this comes up regularly at WECA audit, and I always ask the same question, which is, are we doing enough to make sure that we don't end up closing off large parts of the city all at the same time in order to deliver all these projects within the funding envelope? So they always assure me that Bristol City Council are well on top of that. I just like to ask the same question here, and you know, whether you foresee any particular problems in any areas with delivering all of these in time.
So obviously around the city centre we've got a number of projects that will be happening over a 2-year period. Some of them I think won't be that impacting. So where you look at somewhere like Temple Way, which is very wide, has lots of space, you can move the traffic around without having too much difficulty. Others will be more impacting, and there will be knock-on impacts from one piece of work to another piece of work. We are looking at how you mitigate that, both through what measures can we introduce around like buses and that sort of thing to encourage people to use other sustainable modes, comms packages, how we physically manage the work. So we're breaking the projects up into different chunks. Say when is the biggest impact going to be on this scheme? When's the biggest impact going to be on the other scheme? To some extent, having one bit of works here that's reducing capacity significantly means you might as well do this bit at the same time, because you're going to have reduced traffic kind of to either side of it. You see what I mean? It's not uncommon, when we did Metrobus, when we did GBBN, you get those periods where there's a lot of construction work going on at the same time. We just have to manage it. We're putting various processes into place. We've also commissioned some people to look at how we manage the impact of all the major developments happening as well. So we've got things like Premier Inn, potentially Debenhams coming forward, Galleries got approved at committee last week. How do we manage that and the impact on the city centre, as well as managing all of these works without, creating too much difficulty in the city centre area? So that will then lead to some proposals that we'll put to the combined authority about what we would like to see to be mitigating the works. You're never going to be able to mitigate everything for a programme like this, but we are going through all those processes and managing that risk as best as we will be able to.
Thanks. And just a quick follow-up on that. Are we also confident that we'll be able to procure all of this work, get contractors to do everything that we want to do, given that a lot of it's going to be happening at similar times?
So we have a specific procurement resource assigned to the programme that is actually been a real benefit to the programme in terms of providing advice on our procurement approaches. We're in the process of retendering the new highways frameworks as well, where a lot of the procurement will go through. We also have the option of doing spot tenders if we need to get additional resource in. We're having early engagement with contractors that are on the existing framework and likely to be on the new framework. So we're doing all of that engagement work because we recognise there obviously is that risk around having appropriate resource available. And again, we're managing that as best as we're able to, and we have the appropriate resource in place to do that.
Nick.
Thank you. But for a short paper, this has sparked a lot of ideas with me, at least. The first thing is the purpose of the report is to update on delivery of CRSTS projects in Bristol. That's what it says on the front sheet. But what it doesn't do is update on the delivery of CRSTS projects in Bristol. So I wonder if, Chair, you would mind taking an action to get a report to the next meeting that updates on progress of the projects, line by work stream, what the current status of the project is and what the next milestone is. I think subsequent items on today's agenda really demonstrate the importance of us understanding what it is that we're working on and whether it's happening to time or not. So that's my request.
I'm happy to take that away. I've seen a red, amber, green spreadsheet of exactly that just this morning. So really happy to look at doing that. The next agenda we have is incredibly crowded. So what we might do is send that round for information offline. And if we still want to do that, we'll put it on the forward plan, but maybe not for the next agenda, which we're already looking at possibly extending the length of the meeting.
So that would not be in the public domain if it was sent around by email, would it?
Not initially, but let's send it round and see where we get to.
Okay, thanks. Second thought is that this is the tail end of the CRSTS 1. 2 has, I think, already been allocated money, but we never talk about it here. And I think at some point this committee should get engaged about what the projects are in Bristol and as part of the WECA bid. And I hope that could be on the future work stream as well, to consider what we want to get. If we get to the end of this period, we will have spent £200 million of public money, and we might reflect on what that has delivered in terms of bus lanes and things, and we might then want to say what we want to do in the next period. So next up, I get to the second part of the paper. It's really, firstly, setting up the procurement ahead of the decision. I'm fine with that, actually. That's normal risk mitigation. It probably doesn't even need a decision. If we're not entering into any contracts, then it's just admin. Looking at the individual schemes, these aren't particularly objectionable, but it's a real insight into the itemised cost of things when you see that an individual bus stop costs £75,000. Because I did check, you can actually buy homes in Bristol for less than that. And if public procurement has got us into a place where we're spending more on a bus stop than you could do on a flat in Hanham, then we are just wasting public money, and that's something that I think that we should be very concerned about, looking at the details. Going through to the South Bristol Liberal neighbourhoods, that's spending on street furniture essentially, which is nice. I think other neighbourhoods might be quite jealous of that investment that is coming without any actual restrictions on use of the roads. And there's also a wider conversation to be had around, if we've got this rush we've got to spend the money by 2027, as Councillor Rippington says, where do we actually allocate this unexpected windfall? It's a nice problem to have, but we should consider more broadly what we want to do to spend money quickly on transport improvements.
I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that. No, I think we just note your comments. Yeah, I mean, make sure they're minuted. Kaz.
I just wanted to say, Chair, I spent time at a bus stop to get down here today, and there was an elderly lady at the bus stop. She'd been waiting there for half an hour. No shelter, no information when the bus was going to arrive. And I think in some circumstances, £75,000 spent on a bus stop would be good value.
Rob, David, did you?
So, Nick has already asked my question I was going to pose about CRSTS too, because I think it's really important to get a handle on that. But I would like to come back about and agree with Kaz that spending £75,000 on a bus stop and improving the public realm for that area is a useful enhancement. We're not all expecting to be living in a flat in Hannam. Not that I want to decry living in a flat in Hannam, because I think that's a good thing. But doing that level of investment in the public realm is a good thing, and it's certainly what we should be seen to be doing as a council.
We should get more.
I believe one of the things that costs us a lot of money is actually the traffic management associated around the civil. So it's, that can often add quite a percentage to the cost.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of costs associated with a bus stop because we have the elevated curb that can require drainage changes. There's high quality paving to demarc the area as a bus stop. The shelters themselves, we go for a very good quality bus shelter, particularly in city centre locations. So they're larger, they're a good quality thing because, you know, we want to create a good waiting environment for people. I think all of these bus stops here are funded by Section 106 contributions that we're using as match to the CRSTS programme. Yes, bus stops can be expensive, but they are a key part of our infrastructure. And when we do business cases, upgrading a bus stop is rated as a very high value element because of that kind of encouragement of people to use the network, and it's their kind of main interaction with the network is that bus stop where they're waiting. So it is important that we do get it right.
Rob.
Yeah, I suppose I just want to put on record how it is a little bit frustrating that, I mean, I think you're all obviously laser focused on the actual trying to get this done by March 2027, but it is frustrating there's not wiggle room on that. I don't quite understand why, you know, it says in the paper the government position is a very strict deadline. I just wonder.
I think there are discussions not only from this authority and the combined authority, but from combined authorities across the country about that. And I'm not sure it's something that I want to devote a lot of time to today. Thanks, Rob. But I think we've got a packed agenda. We're already very slightly behind time. And I'd like, I don't know if there's any other comments or questions. Don is very keen for us to move on. So shall I move the report recommendations? I've summarised them. Adam read them out more or less in full. Would anyone like to second? David. And should we have a vote? Can you raise your hand if you are in favour of doing this? It's once again carried unanimously. So no need to carried unanimously. Should we have a very quick comfort break? Bearing in mind that we may be going to exempt session later on and we may be able to work in a little bit of a comfort break then as well. So can I suggest it's no more than, say, 3 minutes? We just very quickly take whatever break we need. I'm going to call us back. Councillor Don has been very keen that we get on with things. Is Don here? No. Should we start anyway? And I'm sure Don would be keen for us to move.
Start without him. He was complaining about having a break in the first place.
So we're on agenda item 11. There's 3 parts to this. We've allowed effectively 10 minutes each, but I'm not going to hold us rigorously to that. So we've got A is looking at the performance report. We've got Nick Smith here, who's kindly come to help us with that. B is the risk report, and I note that we've actually already covered it to some extent, thanks to Tim, in the last agenda item, part of that risk report around CRSTS. And then C is the finance report. So we'll go through those, and Ben's here to help us with that. Thank you, Ben. We'll go through them sequentially, bearing in mind that we're just about on time, a little bit behind time.
No, all right.
Just about all right. We've allowed about half an hour for this, so let's. Should we go through them one by one? So first off is to look at performance against our business plan. I think it's for noting, and I think it does say in the report that this, of course, is against an existing corporate plan that we are managing against, and the indicators there with, but there is a new corporate plan in production. I don't know if there's anything you particularly want to say beyond that, Nick, or just sort of answer questions and.
Thank you. Yes, there isn't really much more to say. This is it's a Q2 performance report against the parts of the existing corporate plan, business plan, that are relevant to the remit of this Transport Connectivity Committee. Versions go to all 8 committees. Just to note that, because obviously there is sometimes a delay with the scheduling of the committees as there is with this one, but the Q3 report will be going to the next committee in March, so there'll be less of a delay for getting the Q3 data. And as you'll have seen, there's 3 city outcomes with metrics that are there, 2 on bus usage and 1 on the killed and seriously injured data from the police, and there's about 8 actions with updates.
So colleagues, comments, questions, heated debate. Nick?
2 points. Just to clarify that Q2 in this context is sort of summer, autumn last year. That's the performance that we're monitoring here.
Correct, yes. It ends at the end of September.
Okay. Yes, financial year. And the other one is an idea that this would be a great place in the agenda to put in an update on the CRSTS delivery, because that's actually what we're interested in.
Point well made, Nick. Thank you. Kaz, then David, then Tim.
Just a few points, Chair. There's an item on the number of people killed or seriously injured in road traffic accidents remains higher than the same period last year. I think that's a little bit concerning, so I think we need to keep on addressing road safety. It's good to see the number of bus passenger journeys has gone back to close pre-pandemic levels. I wanted also to talk about the Appendix A2 with code BPOM12, and it says we are seeing an increase in the number of people killed and seriously injured in road traffic incidents, and it includes the use of e-scooters, mopeds, electric two-wheelers seem to be key contributors. And I wanted to know, is that the rental scooters, or is that e-scooters and e-bikes in general?
I can answer that, because I was quite shocked that the police haven't actually been collecting the data. So despite some of those scooters being illegal, we have no data to suggest whether or not they're legal or illegal scooters. I don't know if that's actually being addressed in terms of the data collection in the future.
I'm not aware that it is. They don't discriminate at the moment or give indication whether it's the rental or a private e-scooter. I think that's driving some of the issues, as are the I think they're kind of calling them powered two-wheelers, which is basically it's a bike, but someone's attached an engine to it. So it's not an electric bike in that sense anymore. It's become more of a motorbike, if you like. So, and people that are using those are often delivery drivers. They're in a hurry, they're in a rush, and the vehicles themselves aren't that safe. So I think there are some issues there on the kind of more e-mobility forms that we have and their safety. They can be perfectly safe. but not put together in the right way, that there can be issues with them, certainly.
I find it extraordinary that we're not collecting that data for part of a national trial, and we would really want to know that difference. So maybe, I think maybe we need to address that with the police. I also find it extraordinary that, frankly, some of the way that some of the delivery on app capitalist system is putting an awful lot of risk on some of those drivers to end up being forced to drive in a dangerous way, which puts themselves and other people at risk, and it's a real pity that they're being squeezed so much that we're seeing some of this potentially. I don't think we've actually got any idea of whether or not people are at work, if they were working in the kind of gig economy as a part of this, and that would be another piece of information that I think would be really useful to collect, but I'm not sure that the systems are there to do that. So is there anything else, Kaz? Okay, next was David.
I appear to be in a room with many great minds that we all think alike, because I was going to ask that question, Jen.
Having an amazing outbreak of unanimity today. Next up was Tim, then Emma.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about park and ride journeys, because I know that we're almost back to pre-pandemic levels with the general bus service, but I don't think we are with park and ride. And I do think park and ride should be an absolutely integral piece of getting people around in our city. And I wonder whether we do enough to promote the use of the park and ride, and whether there is more that we could be doing, could be looking at, whether we should be looking at allocating more funds to advertising it, what you think, you know, why you think it doesn't get as much usage as it probably should.
So my slightly speculative response on park and ride is that following the pandemic, people are tending to work 2 or 3 days a week in the office, maybe in 2 or 3 days a week at home. So where you have private parking underneath offices, etc., there is now more availability of it, if you like, for people to drive in and make use of it when they're doing those 2 days a week or 3 days a week. So I think that is one of the things that's contributing to lower usage of the park and ride sites. They are recovering, they're getting back towards pre-pandemic levels, but as you know, much more slowly than the general bus network. We are working with the combined authority to promote the park and ride sites, and we're saying, you know, a key element of BSIP and other funding pots should be looking at how you promote the park and ride sites, because, you know, there's a cost to operating those services, and the better we promote them, the lower that cost is, but also the lower the volumes of traffic there are coming into the city. And certainly in relation to the CRSTS works and programme, one of the key things will be encouraging more people to use the park and rides, leave your car there, get the bus in rather than driving in and adding to congestion whilst we're doing all the building work. So that's certainly a focus for us, and we are working closely with the combined authority to promote it further.
When we were first briefed on BSIP, there was going to be a major amount of promotions, and that was to try and encourage people to take the bus. I'm not quite sure what happened to that, but the delegated authority executed by the Metro Mayor seems to have put it mostly into pictures of him and his dog and birthday buses, and I think it's a real missed opportunity, particularly as at the time we were doing gross cost contracts on the basis that we were in a low. With a lot of promotions, the money would come back to us, and I haven't seen that happening, and the Metro Mayor has exercised his delegated authority in a way that hasn't been particularly helpful.
Sorry, I was just going to say, our new contracts, of course, are all net, so we won't have that particular issue.
Yes. Emma.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just looking at all the structural and the safety improvements and all of that's been going on. To see so much of that on track, I just think is great. It's like it's not the kind of exciting, oh, you know, we're going to do this, change this. That's really, really important to, you know, safety and people getting around the city. So just wanted to shout out to the officers getting that done. I did get a little bit confused about, I think we were talking about this earlier, about reduce the percentage of principal roads where maintenance should be considered, reduce the percentage of bridges where unprogrammed maintenance should be considered. Just what that means, really, just not that clear. What
Yeah, basically we undertake a condition survey of the road every single year, and it's done in 5 colours, actually, not just red, amber, green, there's blue so on orange, and it basically informs our data for our surfacing programs and everything. So from that, we can also take our principal road network, how much is structurally unsound, how much is functionally impaired, how much is good. And so that percentage comes from that survey. 10% is actually quite a challenging target. I've literally just this week had the figures, and it's actually about 13% is structurally impaired in the city. So we are going backwards still, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, just to say with the road safety, and you know, it feels like something that we really need to look at and not speculate on. And if that's speaking to the police more, if it's speaking to those companies within the gig economy, if it's speaking to unions about this increase in road safety around, you know, whether that's people making their bikes electric or just because they're on time limits all the time, if that is something that's contributing to road deaths and injuries in the city, we need to investigate it. So I really hope we can, yeah, actually do a bit more of a deep dive at some point on why that's happening.
I'm going to take two actions away. One is to talk or write to the police and ask them to maybe think about making sure that we can differentiate between legal and illegal scooters, and whether or not is people in the gig economy contributing to this. And the other one is just completely gone, is to make sure that when we're looking at how so the bus grant has just gone through WECA, and it has a lot of delegated authority, but in conjunction with directors. So I'm going to be making sure that we do everything we can to make sure that our new net cost contracts, our park and ride and everything else are properly marketed and promoted. And if using, if possible, the bus grant to do that. Rob?
I just wanted to suggest on that point about the about the oh, my mind has gone completely. No, come back to me.
It's getting late, isn't it? Kaz?
I'll just give Rob a few minutes maybe to come back to him, I'm sure. But I've just noticed that I think Parliament be debating e-mobility at some point in the future. And I think this city will have maybe something to contribute towards that debate.
Having amazing outbreak of unanimity. I think if you look at the figures, Bristol has been an outlier in the uptake of e-scooters and e-mobility. So I think it would be really good for to make sure that maybe we'll think about how we feed into parliamentary debates as well. It's maybe something we can take up with local MPs as well. I'm going to move us on to the next part of this, which is the risk report. I think it's worth saying we've already talked briefly about the CRSTS programme, and the failure to deliver it might mean that we're not completing things and improving the city. I believe one of the ones that didn't quite meet the corporate risk register is an associated one, which is the one particularly Tim was talking about, which is making sure we're programming CRSTS in a really good way to make sure that it's done as quickly as possible, but at the same time, when we're doing everything everywhere all at once, that we don't gridlock the city, and that we're very carefully thinking about the sensitive places and programming or sequencing them in as we can. I believe, Alex, that's or Adam or Nick, that's that is something we're actively managing, but it just hasn't quite reached the heights of this corporate risk report. Is that right?
I mean, that's correct. So even if it's not in here, it's still on the register, and it is being actively looked at and reviewed all the time.
Thanks. Is there any other comments that people would like to make about the risks? Kaz?
Yes, Chair. I saw a new risk, CRR 58, and it talks about the increasing complaints and litigation, resulting in the need to divert resources from core business to manage these issues. It seems to have gone up to an impact score of 7, which means implying a financial cost of greater than £5 million. I just want to understand the sort of the litigation element of that money. Is it a similar order of magnitude to for example, the capital works for York Road, which is £6.1 million? How much is the litigation costing us?
It's a really difficult thing to analyse because litigation can run over many, many years. So 1 year you could have quite a low cost because you've got personal injury claims which take 5, 6, 7 years to actually go through the courts and work their way out at the other end, and then, you know, it could be just tire claims. My understanding, we are working with the risk team and we're trying to pull some sort of regular data out from them, but that's still, like I say, a work in progress. The litigation, we think, is roughly around £200,000 a year, which actually is quite low, but that doesn't actually relate to the amount of claims because we have quite a robust inspection process under our Highways Act duties. It's called Section 58. Basically, we have an inspection regime. We're entitled to, should we say, inspect the highway in such a way that we don't have to know its condition 24/7, 365 days of the year, because that's an impossibility. So under Section 58, it gives us the ability to have a robust inspection regime and making sure that we can then defend ourselves in court. So whilst we might not pay out, claims are increasing. The amount of resource being put into claims is increasing because the asset is deteriorating, depreciating. However, that doesn't necessarily relate to cost in claims to the council in relation because of our inspection regime and robust way we can defend ourselves through the Highways Act, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to talk about CRR 43, the CRSTS risk. There are some actions that, one action that was due to be finished in 31st of January 2025, and it's on 0%. Can we have an update on where we are at that risk, considering we're at the 6th of February? Was there an actual meeting? Did the WECA committee actually sign off on all these things? I believe they did, because I was there.
Yes, more or less, I think. So we will update that for next time. But yeah, a lot of acceleration proposals have come forward, been approved. There's a lot of stuff happening. There's different bits of it being approved at different meetings, in essence. But yeah.
That's good to hear.
Well,
Thank you.
I was just going to say, Councillor, I was there as well, wasn't I? Yes, and it was agreed. Yeah, so we just need to update these. But obviously, I think this was prepared before.
I think the frustration here is with all of these things, as Nick established at the beginning of all this, that this is all takes quite a long time to come through the system. I think it goes to the S&R committee first. So sometimes we are looking at stuff that's kind of not exactly live.
I would just add the progress percentages on those don't look quite correct. I need to go back and check because there is more progress made on the bottom two as well. The recruitment and the PMO.
Shall we move on? Budget, I think, is the last part of this item. Something I have to say here, isn't there? The purpose of the report is that the council revenue and capital budget was agreed by full council in February 2023, and this report presents to our committee transport financial forecast at period 8 against the budget which was the end of November 2024. So again, we've got a bit of a lag. I can see Tim chomping at the bit to come in first.
Well, I'm just going to ask this question before Rob forgets it, actually. Yeah, the e-scooter concession and the fact that WECA have recently advised that there's a break clause in the contract, and that the provider wants to negotiate out our share of the contract. Yeah, I'm just wondering if we have any say in that whatsoever. It seems to me, given nobody's very happy with the performance of the scooter provider, that seems a bit of a poor show that they also want to take away our revenue from the trial.
So the contract is managed between the combined authority and the provider, but we have obviously made our representations on this issue and others.
Do we represent strongly?
and repeatedly.
And robustly, no doubt. No other comments on the budget? Okay, I mean, obviously, we keep monitoring this because there are variances in there. I'm going to sum up. I'm sorry I didn't manage to sum up quite as we went, so that you're going to have to listen to me for a moment or two. Just for clarity, the recommendation in this report is that we're noting the report as per the recommendation that we note the performance against the business plan relevant to the committee, and that there's a process underway to refresh the corporate strategy, which is the performance report. On the risk report, we note that we noted the report and raised some actions from it, and finally that note the contents of the report on the P8 forecast, and that we're continually monitoring against that. Let's move on to agenda item 12, which is the Portway. We've allowed 25 minutes for this, and we are pretty much on time. So, and actually, amazingly, the public forum, the public gallery is now empty. I thought this would be maybe, I was expecting. Oh yes, David's there still, but there's two people who. Hello, David. There's two people that I thought might be here to listen to this. Okay. So there are still people online. So this is to seek approval for the submission of a full business case to the West of England Combined Authority for City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement funding, subject to approval to accept and spend or invest the funding to deliver the A4 Portway Strategic Corridor project. This is a key decision update report, as it's a decision involving over 500,000 and impacts more than 2 wards. Within the full business case in Appendix H, there's some exempt information which members of the committee have had access to. This was published as a separate supplement alongside the agenda reports pack. Members are advised to refrain from raising exempt information in public session. If you do want to raise any exempt information, the committee will need to move into exempt session. This is particularly sensitive commercial data from the commercial bus operators. So I'm going to invite Alex and Adam to introduce and outline the report.
Yep, so this is the A4 Portway full business case, essentially seeking approval to submit the full business case to the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority and to accept the funding and deliver the scheme in essence. So the scheme runs the length of the Portway from the Park and Ride all the way into Hotwell's Gyratory and just to the kind of the edge of Hotwell's Gyratory. Consists mainly of additional bus lanes in both directions along the Portway and some upgrades to cycling provision through a shared path on the river side of the Portway. And while the changes in Hotwell are maybe look less significant, they're quite significant in terms of the impacts on traffic flows and encouraging use of the Park and Ride at both Portway and A370 as well. So fairly significant changes in Hotwell that encourage the use of the Park and Ride services. The full business case has been prepared and submitted, so we've gone through the process with WECA of them checking the full business case. The scheme cost is estimated at 10.7 million and the benefit cost ratio was 2.52. There have been some ongoing discussions with the Combined Authority about that BCR. They've had some issues with it around how much of resurfacing and that element is included in some of the DIS benefit. Either way, they have signed off the FBC to go to committee for approval. There is an opportunity to spend an additional 8.4 million on resurfacing. It's likely if we did bring it into the programme, it would cost less than that because we could combine it with the other works. That would enable us to mitigate some of the impact of the scheme on the surface, because where you change lining, it can impact the surface of the road. Also improve the asset for the longer term. We've done lots of engagement on the scheme. We've done the active travel engagement as well. We've made changes to the scheme due to active travel England comments. And the main thing now is to seek approval for the scheme. There's £2 million already allocated and being spent and approved on the access junction. So that's the junction itself where the Park and Ride is. that enables buses to go in and out towards Avonmouth rather than just use the Bark and Ride route into town, which will enable us to have better connectivity from that location. So, yeah, in essence, the recommendations then are to note the approvals granted on item 10 at the Cabinet meeting on the 5th of March, approve the submission of the full business case to the combined authority, and authorise the Exec Director in consultation with the Director of Finance and the Committee Chair, subject to the approval of that full business case by the combined authority, to take all steps required to accept and spend the funding, tender and procure contracts and award those contracts, and then accept the tenders and award and spend on those contracts to deliver the resurfacing as well, should that funding become available. So currently we have the funding allocated for the main scheme. The resurfacing is part of a wider discussion about what funding is still available on CRSTS and what funding is still available to spend within the March 27 deadlines, which is an ongoing conversation that we will obviously update on when we have more detail and when those things are agreed. It's probably just very quickly worth pointing out as well that the Task and Finish group approved some funding for additional buses from South Bristol to Avonmouth Sevenside area, which will make use of this infrastructure as well.
I have a question, but I'm going to let David go first, so I'm not stealing any possible thunder.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. One which comes basically from some of the public forum questions. How much would it cost to put a LTN 120 separated cycle lane along the Portway, please?
So in order to fit a LTN 120, I mean, the shared path is LTN 120 compliant. To have a fully segregated LTN 120 compliant route, which requires narrowing all the lanes, moving the central reservation. Through narrowing the lanes, because of the type and makeup of traffic that uses the Portway, which is well in excess of the standard number of HGVs we would get on most corridors, the view from our highways team is that we would need to reconstruct significant portions of the Portway, because when you narrow the lanes you create additional tracking because the vehicles are constricted to much smaller parts of the road, and therefore the impact of those vehicles is constrained to a smaller area and therefore isn't spread around as much. So it has a much bigger impact on the road. In order for the road to last how long it needs to last, you need to reconstruct the road rather than just resurface it. So resurfacing, you take a skim off, do a few patches, put the skim back on. Where you're reconstructing, you're taking a big chunk of the road away to then create a stronger base for the road to sit on. So estimated finger in the air cost is more in the kind of 20-30 million plus to do that reconstruction along there, which would then enable that cycle route to go in through the narrowing of the lanes. And this is where we have to look at opportunity cost as much as anything else, both the time, the carbon impact of doing that, but also what else could we be spending £30 million on. I had a look at the data earlier this week. There's around 6 pedestrians an hour on average using the footpath around where Roman Way is. That's going to be a 3-metre wide path. So, we have about 30 cyclists an hour at the moment. Obviously, we'd like to see a lot more, but I find it hard to see how many more pedestrians you're going to get walking up and down that location. So it's almost as though you'd be paying that to segregate pedestrians from the cycle route, if you see what I mean. Like, you've kind of created a good cycle route and there's some pedestrians on it. You would be paying that amount to create a segregated pavement for the limited number of pedestrians, which is why, from a strategic perspective, we don't feel that is good value in essence.
Thank you. That's a really useful answer. And my second question is, I really welcome the fact that the speed limit is dropping from 50 to 40 along the majority of it. Has there been any investigation about putting an average speed camera between Sea Mills and Bridge Valley Road to actually enforce that, please?
It's not something I'm aware that we've looked at, using average speed cameras. We could certainly consider whether it's feasible or not, but we haven't looked at it as part of this scheme.
Because anecdotally, I have cycled along that road, and it is quite scary because of the speed that vehicles actually do go along there. And there's been a number of fatalities on that road where people have actually exceeded the speed. Has been a major factor in those traffic collisions.
Okay, yeah, we can take that away.
I think that sort of leads into my question, which is if we do manage to combine these two things, which is the resurfacing and the actual scheme. We've heard today particularly some concerns about the crossings, and I'm just asking if we could have a look at what some potential scope creep to bring some of those crossings into the scheme, if we are able to save the money and therefore afford to see a bit of scope creep.
I mean, I would still question adding in extra crossings. We don't have enough money to maintain all the traffic signals that we have at the moment, and you know, there are lots of areas of the city that would and do ask for traffic signal crossings to get people safely across the road. The volumes of pedestrians in that area are quite limited. There are a number of crossings along there. You know, we can put stuff in, but we have to be able to maintain it as well. And currently we can't maintain that asset with the funding that we receive. So, you know, we have to be cognizant of that sort of issue when we make decisions about where we put new infrastructure.
I think that's a fair point. I think we always need to think about maintenance. I would like to think we've heard very strongly that we have got an interchange here at the railway station. I think that's probably, if we were going to look at anywhere, that might be one. And I can see some thumbs up from the back of the room there. So I've got...
Well, I was going to ask the same thing that you've asked, so I would back that up as well. You know, there's a footbridge here which clearly has been put in because it's the only safe way to cross that road at the moment. But yeah, it would be much better to have especially as we're reducing the speed on that road, to have a controlled crossing that people could cross safely in that location. I would definitely back you up there, Ed.
I think we need to recognise there's a price, a cost window, and that this might blow it, but if we can just remain open to the possibility of that. I'm going to take Nick, then Kaz.
Okay, I'm not sure I was first, but anyway. Yeah, I mean, this is already quite an expensive, we did discuss a number of extra things, and this is quite an expensive project already. Obviously, more crossings also can reduce bus times. Can increase bus journey times, because actually the bus is coming to a halt when people push the button or whatever. So main transport hub is Portway Park and Ride Station, not Shirehampton Station, I would say. That bridge is little used. It's quite dangerous for anyone to cross it, especially when the apple tree drops its apples all over and leaves all over there. It's quite an odd thing. I prefer it would take it away at some point, in all honesty. Overall, this project obviously is really welcomed out my way. It is going to improve what's already a very good corridor, especially for buses, and that's the main thing. Could do with some more enforcement, I think, of the bus lanes. It was certainly incoming down towards the bridge, there is a camera, but then went further up towards that old cricket ground, or whatever was it, Lloyd's, one of those cricket ground used to be. There's a lot of undertaking goes on there by crafty cars before they're in sight of the cameras, so people do abuse those bus lanes if they're not properly enforced. Combining this, obviously, with the changes which are about to be implemented to the entrance egress to the Portway Park and Ride, this is going to really stimulate quite a change in the bus network in that part of the city. You know, there are going to be buses leaving from Portway Park and Ride over to North Somerset. There are going to be buses coming into there from other parts of northwest Bristol, and then where people are going to be able to change them to the bus to the centre of Bristol, or to the train to other parts of the centre of Bristol. So I think we mustn't in any way underestimate the transformational nature of this project, along with the changes to the Park and Ride and its development as truly a transport hub, where people swap between modes. It's not perfect. We know when we were designing it, when it was being designed, we realised it wasn't perfect, but we also realised we were getting near to what we could probably ask in terms of finance, and it's a massive improvement. In terms of a corridor, it is by far the best across the city. You know, if only the M32 could be like this, you know, and offer that kind of corridor approach with bus services and transport interchange and stuff. then another part of the city would have what we are. But that's another.
We're working on it, Tom.
Yeah, so did I. But still, keep at it. Thank you. And I won't mention any names of officers, but one gentleman's worked on this from the beginning, and please pass on my thanks to him. Yeah, I'm really pleased with it.
I really welcome those comments from someone who obviously initiated this project, has looked very hard at it, and knows it intimately and locally as someone where lives and represents a ward affected by this. So thank you, Don. So there was a comment there that was very much supported a consultation in Don's ward.
Yeah, just a quick comment that when the programme was put together, that the Portway was very much envisaged as something that could be fully segregated, fully reliable for buses to provide that route in the city centre then that can link up other areas and people can rely on it. So it's part of the wider strategy to create better interchange in the city centre, and the Portway service is key to that, which, I know there may not be that much congestion outbound on the Portway, but having that segregation is really important to ensure that service is always there, always running, never delayed if there is congestion. So that's kind of a key part of the wider strategy.
So I've got Nick, Kaz, then Rob.
Thanks. I wonder if the prioritisations on this project have perhaps suffered over the budget being very contracted for a long time and then suddenly expanding at the last minute. So it seems like there's been a very tight control of spending to keep it down to about 10 million, which is a good thing. If tight control of spending, this means you've got more money to go around for other stuff. But then another 8 million is suddenly available so we can resurface the road. But that seems like things might have been cut out at stages along the way. And the overriding priority is to prioritise that bus lane, which may or may not be required for much of the day. And in doing so, we've cut out a segregated cycle lane. So there's the missed opportunity for improving that bridge at Charlton. It seems to have steps on it, so it's not great for buggies or wheelchairs. I don't believe that the crossings where the shared cycle pavement goes over all of the different side streets are particularly well designed in order to prioritise that cycle motion. And right at the other end of it, I know that Rob's a big fan of putting in tiny little parks where you can. We've got a great opportunity at Dowry Square. There's a load of tarmac there going unused, just as the Hotwell Road joins Dowry Square, which is within the red line boundary of this scheme, but doesn't feature any public realm improvements. So it doesn't seem to be a harmful intervention, so I will probably support it, but it could have been an awful lot better given what we might end up spending on it from my perspective.
Just going to pick up on the Dowry Square element. Due to the ongoing discussions and consultation around the Western Harbour proposals, it was very much intended to be reasonably light touch through that area to deliver the bus lane infrastructure that we need without doing lots more. There was discussion early-ish on about what we could do in the area, but it's felt to be premature whilst that conversation and discussion was ongoing. We didn't want to spend money on something that then potentially might not be good value.
Kaz, Rob, and then I've got Don and Tim both wanted to come back.
Thanks. I just wanted to say I very much welcome this scheme, and I know that Don has championed it for a long time, and I think it's going to be a really good thing to encourage people to use the park and ride as a potential means to get into the city. Just a few, and of course there's going to be a lot of development at Brabazons and other parts of the area, so we need to encourage people to use things like park and ride. Just a few minor points actually. So going westbound, I was concerned that the filter to go up to Bridge Valley Road starts before the Rockfall canopy. That just seemed a little bit odd to me. We've heard about speed cameras and enforcement. I also had a note about speed cameras on my things here about where the median strip disappears on the dual carriageway near Bennett's Patch, White's Paddock. I just wonder if a speed camera might be worth putting there. But my final, more substantive point is about the 24/7 operation, and this is from my own education, I guess. It says the inbound bus lane is proposed to have a 4.5 metre bus lane operational 24/7 to comply with LTN 120. And I just wanted somebody to explain that to me, because I thought LTN 120 was to do with cycling infrastructure.
As I think what that's referring to is that it's 4.5 metres wide, which is what complies with LTN 120. So where you want to enable cyclists to be in bus lanes, you make the bus lane wide enough that the bus can pass safely with having a cycle lane there. I mean, in terms of the speed camera, I think I will take away the point about average speed cameras. We don't fully control where and when we can put in other like kind of point-based speed cameras. I think actually a road of this length, perhaps average speed camera is a more appropriate approach. But yeah, it's a good point, and there have been a number of incidents, some of them around that particular area.
I think we mentioned earlier the side roads and the fact that, you know, the experience of scooting or cycling or using a mobility scooter along the Portway, along the shared path, was significantly, and I found this, you know, I went up that way, and you do get stopped at numerous places, and it's not as continuous as you'd like it to be. Is there anything we can do in the spirit of the tweaking that we were maybe doing earlier to make it more? I mean, I think, did someone mention that we could look at drop curbs around there more? I don't know whether that's feasible, but it seems like that could be something that is a sort of halfway house between, obviously, a very strong view in the public forum today that there should be a separated cycle. And you've given a good account of why that's maybe strategically unviable. But is there anything else we can do, I suppose, is what I'm asking, to mitigate sort of those concerns?
I mean, so we can certainly look at additional drop curbs so that people can bypass a stop line. I think it's worth pointing out that having the bus lane there will move all that heavy traffic a lot further away from pedestrians and cyclists. So, you know, as it stands, you know, and I've cycled up there, you are right next to some very big, heavy waste vehicles in particular that are thundering up and down there. And, you know, the road surface is quite dusty as well. You know, it's not entirely pleasant. Having the bus lane there will mean that all that traffic will be moved 3-4 metres away from the pedestrian and cycling routes. And I think that will also provide benefit around those crossings of side roads, because it'll be much clearer when a vehicle is moving across to turn into them, because it'll have to change lanes. So it will provide some other benefits like that I think are a little bit less tangible and less obvious. There are very limited numbers of properties along the Portway, particularly on that side, which is why there aren't huge numbers of vehicle movements, and therefore those crossings, in my view, are likely to be reasonably adequate for the job that they're doing. You know, it's not the perfect all singing, all dancing scheme, but it's doing what it needs to do.
Microphone.
Page 240, it's got a really good example of where the crossing doesn't exactly line up. It's just opposite Riverleys. The road isn't labelled on this, but the dropped curb and the tactile paving is right in front of a green patch of landscaping.
I think
240 of the PDF.
I'm going to bring in Don and then Tim.
Yeah, thank you. Just to counter some comments that were made earlier, this also goes to Sevenside, which is one of the economic engines, maybe the biggest economic engine of the west of England, and full of a lot of very leading edge and green industry. For a long time, they've struggled to recruit people out there because of the very poor transport links. It's interesting to see the number 41 bus now. Certain times of the day absolutely packed with people coming from the centre and the east of the city, going out to work at, of course, unusual times because it's 24/7. environment out there. One could wish that, you know, WECA perhaps had got a bit more of a grip of the whole direction for Sevenside and bringing together the unitaries both in transport and economic terms out there, recognise what they've got there. I think that's kind of happening a little bit, but this is also really important, just as a way of getting the workforce that the companies out there need, which they've really struggled to obtain, because you simply can't get a bus to this enormous industrial area at certain times of the night or the morning, or you're changing buses, or you're having to take a bike on the train, cycle the last 2 or 3 miles, which is very hard work if you're working manually, long hours. So yeah, anything which improves things, and this does, is great for the economy of the region as well.
I'm going to give the last word to Tim.
Thank you. Just one thing that I don't think is in this paper, but it is a large paper, so I may have missed it, but would be useful in future, especially where you're talking about putting in 24-hour bus lanes, is the actual number of buses that are currently using it, as opposed to the times that you might improve the journeys at certain times of day. You know, I've got no idea how many buses are going up and down the Portway at the moment, so that would be really useful. The other thing I was going to ask about on here is about the, it mentions the Metro bus, Bristol City Centre to Avonmouth and Sevenside. It says this is not expected until 2036. What's that all about?
Not entirely sure. So
Page
there is
62.
in the JLTP, there is a commitment to Metro bus to Avonmouth Sevenside. This is in essence us enabling that. So, if you look at, say, Long Ashton Park and Ride, that used to be a Park and Ride bus, became a Metro bus service that was stopping. The Portway Park and Ride is part of the way there, and it's already a stopping service to Portway Park and Ride. This scheme and the junction works start to enable that improved accessibility out to Avonmouth Sevenside. So that JLTP objective is in part met by this scheme. The remainder of it is probably more around bus funding and bus services as opposed to physical infrastructure. This kind of does the physical infrastructure element. And then, if the Portway Park and Ride, for example, could carry on into Avonmouth, if that made sense from a bus perspective, that's what that service would then look like. Whether that needs a huge amount of infrastructure beyond the Park and Ride, I think we'd have to look at, but I think it's the JLTP 5 or 4, commitment that it's referring to.
Did you say there's more infrastructure would be needed to deliver that beyond this scheme? It just seems odd to have a plan for a bus from 2036 onwards. I don't know if you,
right.
You know.
I think that's the JLTP 4 commitment that would be in place by 2036. Is what I think that refers to. As I say, this is kind of our first part of enabling that.
Right.
I don't, I'm not an absolute expert on the area, but knowing the area, I don't think there's huge amounts of additional infrastructure you would need beyond the Park and Ride. There's bits you might want to do and bits that you simply couldn't do because there isn't the space. But yeah, that I think is more a service issue of then connecting from the Park and Ride through to those other areas. And actually, is there a better solution, which might be that the Park and Ride runs up and down and you have services from the Park and Ride and the rail station that link into the area, and that might provide the same outcome that you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if there's a need for a bus doing that, you'd hope we could deliver one before 11 years' time.
So I'm going to wrap this up. I think there's a very strong feeling from this committee that if there is a significant saving on putting these two elements together, that we'd like to see some tweaks, maybe to crossings, maybe to the drop curves and the continuity of the cycle path, and particularly maybe some of that could be largely paint-based. I think we'd like to see possibly also speed cameras or average speed cameras brought into it, particularly if there's savings to be had. all of which need to be easily maintained. And I think average speed cameras might have a bit of an issue there because the revenue doesn't fall to the council, but the maintenance liability does. I'm anxious that we've just commissioned a brand new bus route. It's quite experimental. It's getting people from the south of the city out of this corridor through to Seven Sides of Avonmouth. I think it's very exciting. It's designed to go around shifts, but I'm a little bit anxious that it might be quite delayed by the works. And so I just want us to do everything we can to make sure that that runs efficiently and that what's quite an experimental service is not too adversely affected by the works. And I'm just going to, I don't, unless you really want to respond to that, I just sort of thought I'd mention that we want to do everything we can to make sure that the buses get priority rather than just being lumped in with traffic wherever possible during the works.
I was just going to say we have got some funding allocated for while we're doing the works to the entrance to put on additional park and ride services due to the extra distance they're running. So it's something we're aware of and working with the combined authority on.
Okay, so we've just got a very experimental new service. It'd be sad to see it not prospering because of the works, which eventually will make it a much more attractive proposition. So I'm going to move the report recommendations, which is note the approvals granted on item 10 at the Cabinet meeting on on the 5th of March 2024, approves the submission of a full business case as in Appendix E to the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority, and authorises the Executive Director of Regeneration in consultation with the Finance and Committee Chair, subject to full approval of the business case by WECA, to take all the steps required to accept and invest this funding, tender and procure contracts, award contracts and invest the funding to deliver the works as set out in the business case, and should we be successful in getting the additional funding, also award and spend contracts to deliver resurfacing. So I'm going to move that. Would anyone like to second that? Kaz, I'm taking that as your seconder. Could you all clearly indicate by hand if you support this? And that's Tim. I'm assuming you're voting. Sorry, I didn't want to gerrymander you, but just assuming by what you said. So that's carried unanimously. No need for any further votes. And so that's carried unanimously, and we move on. So then this one is the Harbour Walkway. We've allowed 30 minutes for that, and if we stick to that time, we'll be pretty much spot on that. One of the reasons we've allowed the time, Don, is that if we do need to move into exempt session, we do have to come back here to finalise that decision. So that all takes a little bit of time. This is to seek approval for the additional funding to cover the costs of a partial bank collapse and increased delivery costs, reprofile the delivery timescale and consider wider contractor costs. It's a key decision because it involves more than 500,000. This item has exempt information included and will require us to move into an exempt session. I'm going to ask Adam to introduce and outline the report and to also outline why the item includes exempt information, why it's necessary to move to exempt session. We will, so I'm going to invite you to ask any questions that can be asked in public session only, and if we stray in towards the exempt session, I've got both Adam and Sam ready to wave wildly that we need to quickly move into another room. So I think that's set up Adam to introduce this report.
Yeah, so we'll go through this in a little bit more detail than usually, just to be clear on what the paper is saying. The exempt, the exempt element is due to commercial confidentiality. We're happy to discuss those elements in the exempt session if needed. So we'll go through in detail. Everything I'm talking about here is essentially the non-exempt element. So the Harbour Walkway is first envisaged as part of a framework for the wider area around Temple Meads. Other schemes involved in that were the cycle route on Cattle Market Road, the bridge to Temple Island, and the redesign of Temple Circus. The aim was to improve the connectivity around Temple Meads, which has been long been a barrier to movement. That aim still stands. We've got the eastern entrance, which is a very big benefit to access to the station, but that is only access to the station. It doesn't provide a through route past the station. You know, it's a very large structure. So the Harbour Walkway enables that movement along the harbour in line with our quayside walkways planning policy as well, and providing that through route for peds and cyclists wishing to access the city centre. So as such, the benefits are significant and will increase as developments in the area complete and continue to progress. So we've got the Temple Quarter Enterprise Campus, Temple Island, lots of development along Bath Road, and then the wider St Philip's redevelopment. So it's a strategic piece of infrastructure that will seek to enable and mitigate the impacts of those wider developments. The funding came from the land receipt from the Temple Quarter Enterprise Campus, but that did come with a requirement to deliver the Harbour Walkway. So it was written into the contract documents of the land sale that we would deliver the Harbour Walkway as part of that deal. So, you know, I don't think there's any point denying the scheme has had a lot of issues. Clearly there's a lot of lessons to learn for us from those issues. We will obviously look to carry out a lessons learned session and include both our team and the contractors and our consultants in that. We have made a number of improvements in terms of our programme management over the last year or so. So, you know, we did have a lot of resourcing issues a couple of years back. We are much better resourced, and we have arranged that resource in a better way through having a PMO in the transport department, so we're better able to provide that oversight to projects. That said, there's still obviously a lot of kind of contractual issues and how this has been procured and managed throughout that needs to be looked at, and we're quite happy to do a lessons learned session following when the project is completed to understand those issues. So there's a number of design and delivery challenges, partly due to complexity of the design, various other factors that played into it, like COVID, the inflationary pressures, because the scheme took longer than expected. More recently, part of the harbour wall, which is an earthen bank in that area, collapsed into the harbour during a severe storm. That collapse and the need to reinforce a large section of the earthen bank in that area has resulted in significant additional costs, but also delays to the project. And linked to that is also the need to ensure we're not delaying the enterprise campus works as well. We also had some delays due to the collapse of our dredging contractor, which prevented us doing the dredging that was needed to get the project started when we did go onto site, and a number of access issues around the site as well that have caused additional costs. Much of the Harbour Walkway is now built, so that a lot of the columns are in place, which is what the pontoons will be connected to. The pontoons are being constructed in Spain, and they'll be being brought over by boat, and the construction is currently scheduled to complete in November of this year. Inflation has become a major issue for the project, which wasn't envisaged when the original contract was signed, because it was expected to be a much shorter duration, and that didn't allow provide any allowances for inflation. We have also been accruing delay damages as part of the contract, so when a contract delays, we can accrue delay damages for that delay if it's down to the contractor. There may be some further cost increases due to other risks and other issues. Those risks may become issues and necessitate further spend. That's kind of enclosed within the budget that we're talking about. So the revised approach to funding the scheme has been developed to mitigate the impact on the council of the delays and the cost increases, and provide adequate funds to ensure it is fully completed. So we are having 3.5 million of CRSTS money allocated, as well as 2.7 million of EDF, which will represent our match into the into the CRSTS programme, because we have to provide 20% match. And that is in addition to the 3.5 million of capital receipt that we already have as part of the budget. And that will cover any further cost increases due to any issues that we encounter on site. So the total budget then would be up to 9.7 million. The alternative options are very limited and potentially will be more costly to the council. We are obligated to deliver the walkway. It is partially complete. To stop at this stage would create a number of legal issues for us, and could necessitate retendering the remaining works. And because of the way contracts like this are managed, then potentially any new contractor would have to redesign some of the elements as well. So that would most likely result in increased costs to those already described if we had to retender for any reason. The scheme is a key piece of infrastructure for the future needs of Temple Court and St Philip's Marsh as part of that wider regeneration plan. It will provide a high quality and appealing route away from major traffic on a relatively direct alignment, and as such represents a key addition to the city's wider quayside walkways network. Obviously these issues, the amount of time it's taken, the amount of money it's cost are significant, and we need to learn from those, but it doesn't detract from the value that the infrastructure is delivering. So as I said at the start, some of the elements of the paper are exempt, which are in the exempt appendix. If we wish to discuss those elements, there is an exempt session available, which we can go into if needed.
That was a thorough introduction. Thank you, Adam. So I'm going to let David go first and then Nick this time.
Couple of questions which you can say that we need to go to exempt or not, if you like. The bank collapse that's noted in the title of this report, or the purpose of this report, is that to do with the area where the trees were cut down?
No, there was a kind of self-seeded tree in the bank at that location. The trees were cut down beyond Valentine's Bridge. This is back at the campus site. There was like a tree that blew down, and that may
So
have
it's
partially.
not those willows that were cut back.
Yeah, so it's not that area. No,
Okay.
it's down by the campus, down by opposite Motion.
That's good to know. Paragraph 6 talks about the council has sought delayed damages from the contractor. Are those negotiations still ongoing?
Yeah, it's common in contracts that you have delayed damages, and it's always part of a discussion with the contractors as to how that gets applied.
Because I note in the costing table at the end, which lists things, there's no mention of repurposing those damages into the cost of the project.
So that would be part of the wider discussion ongoing around the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, while we're in public session, obviously I should say that I'm horrified that a contract has spiralled like this, but that's hopefully obvious. The question about the bank collapse. Now, am I right in thinking that that is from the parcel of land that was bought by the university, and that they would then be the riparian owner of that section of river? So why has the council absorbed the cost of repairing that rather than the landowner, which is I think the university?
So it is still owned by the council. There's a strip along the edge of the harbour that was still owned by the council, which is where the collapse has occurred. So we are still the owner of that section.
So if there's a really, really tiny strip of river wall, which isn't big enough to put a footpath on, but is small enough for us to have an ongoing liability, this is an incredible deal the university got.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a wall as such. It's a mud bank in essence. I wasn't involved in the land discussions about what exactly we were selling at the time, so I don't know the full detail of that.
What my script says now, and each of these meetings we've had one challenge or another. So this is another bit of learning. Do we need? So I am going to propose that we make the following resolution, which is that under section 100A4, and I'm going to read it all out in full, of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of the Schedule 12A of the Act. So I'm proposing that. Would anyone like to second and move into exempt session? There's no seconder, so we don't take a vote, and we will, in which case I suggest that we move straight on.
Sorry, Chair. I didn't realise this wouldn't happen. Yes, I have questions on the exempt appendices, so if we have to move, then yes, I can second.
Okay, so that's seconded. Should we take a vote as to whether or not we need to vote on that? So let's move in. Let's take a vote as to whether or not to move into exempt session. So I'm going to vote for that. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4 against. 7, 4 against, and abstaining. 1 abstention, which is Don. So at this moment we all get up and move into, I think it's the Lord Mayor's reception room. I'm advised that there may be recording equipment So apparently we're back on the internet, we're being broadcast. We've had some clarifications from officers in response to questions from members. Don, I think you were going to ask a question.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask officers, we understand from our discussions that there has been obviously impacts of COVID on the contract, which I know impacted on many of our contracts actually, not just this one, particularly on the ability of the contractors to deliver what they had previously agreed to, because it was unexpected in a sense, the trust budget, etc. Also, there was the collapse of the physical bank, and also there were some mistakes made by different parties. But I think what we would like to be assured by officers is that we will not be back here in a year's time having this very same discussion, that the amount of money we are now proposing to we are now going to agree to or not will be sufficient to finish this project completely, as we are contractually obliged to do.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor. What I can say is that we have pulled together a budget which we consider to be the maximum budget envelope to complete the project and settle all outstanding amounts. That includes finalising the arrangements with the contractor, but also the other elements connected with the project. And certainly we are going to negotiate the arrangements carefully and only agree to payments that we think are due.
I'm going to move the recommendations, which are approve the port. Am I going to read all these out, or are we happy that members of the public can see them on the screen? That we're devices, they're in the paperwork, we've all seen it, and I'm not going to read out the entire set of recommendations because they're not changed in any way. People happy with that? So if I move that, would someone like to second this? Someone's got to, if we're going to get anywhere. Thank you, Rob. Can you please clearly vote by hand whether or not you approve this or not? That's 7-4 against, 1, which is Nick. And I'm going to assume that there's no abstentions, so that's carried. And I think that means that we can thank you everyone for your attendance. Thank you officers for staying and patiently answering and competently answering all the questions. And thank you all. I'll see you again on the 20th of March at, well, it says at 5 p.m. at the moment. We will be having a little look to see whether or not we need to bring forward that start time a little bit early. Nick, if that's something I know that you work and it's difficult for you to get here, we may just be if you could maybe put in a hold in your diary to get here a few minutes early, that would be very helpful. See you all on the 20th of March, and thank you all.